Hello, everybody, Legacy players, D&T players, whatever you might be. Welcome to the 2024 State of the Noodle address. Joining me, while you may not be able to see them on the screen, I can assure you that they are present. Person who probably does not need much introduction for this crowd. xJCloud, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Also, I am wearing my official tie. You can't see it, chat, but I promise it is there.
I can
I got my
confirm. I saw it myself. Also,
very small bird tie.
yeah. Please let us know if the audio levels are off between us. It looks like they're about right on my screen, but who knows? Um,
Yeah, I'm always quiet, so.
yeah. Notably, while we were in the countdown, thank you Tide Holocat and the Kachow for the follows. Thank you Swagahot for the Prime resub. Appreciate it very much. Maybe up 5%. Okay, I can do that. Boop. All right.
I'm not in front of a podium. Your podium guy didn't give me the podium in time, Jared.
All right. I will take them up just a little bit. Let me know if that sounds better. Um, cool. All right. So, yes, this is the State of the Noodle. We're going to be talking about a number of different topics related to Legacy D&T. We'll get to them one by one. I will say from the start, while we will probably get to some questions, I will at least at the beginning ask that you hold questions. We'll do a dedicated Q&A towards the end once we've gotten through all of the topics that we have to talk about. But without further ado, I think we're gonna kick it off, and we're gonna start by addressing the elemental in the room, which is that grief is unfortunately still legal in Legacy. Um, and it's important to bring this up because uh, so much of what we are going to be talking about is unfortunately centered around the fact that, scam, rescaminator, whatever you want to call it, um, is clearly the best deck in Legacy, and it's not particularly close, and it's basically a level or two above all the other decks that are currently being played. Um, so just keep that in mind as we, know that like that is going to be informing a great deal of our opinions on cards, the card choices, and the lists that we're going to show, things like that. Is there anything
Yeah,
you want to add to that?
yeah. Like the discussion that's been happening a lot, like on Twitter, in person, in the D&T Discord and stuff. A lot of times, my opinions are not echoed by some people in the Discord based on paper events, and just paper is just gonna always your local legacy scene is always gonna look different than what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah.
But like, if you want to build the best D&T deck that you possibly can to compete at a high level during this era of Magic, you really do have to plan for the scam matchup. So while it's maybe fine if you're playing your 15-person local or whatever, if you go to a paper event, even like a 5K or whatever, you may not play against like Grief 5 rounds like you would online, but you're going to have to beat Grief to do as well as you can in the event at some point. If you run hot, you get to the final rounds, you get to the top 8, you're going to have to beat a bunch of scam players that are also there. So I do think that these choices will carry over to paper outside of like small local scene stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fully agree. I do think, not to belabor the point, I think that is an important part, is that like paper Magic does tend to be safe from like the worst parts of, when a format gets really unbalanced like this. And for that reason, some people might not totally get it, but everything you said totally applies. The first section we're going to go over is talking about new cards, and with a slight section dedicated towards old cards that are looking different with the new context of what Modern Horizons 3 brought to the format. So let me get rid of this grief out of the way. And we're going to start off with, I think, is at least tied for the card that people have been talking about the most, which is White Orchid Phantom. I'm going to go ahead and let you start off with this one, JR, and I'll go off
So
you.
I think this is the probably the single best upgrade that DNT has gotten in general in a long time, but like specifically in MH3, and I think it is the backbone of what makes mono white potentially playable again.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience so far, mono white will live and die based on how powerful this card is, and it is a very good card in a lot of matchups. Legacy, notably a format that has a lot of very powerful utility lands, Urza Sagas and Dark Depths, stuff like that, and also skimps on a lot of basics. In your, wasteland, sometimes people are even pairing with Ghost Quarter, stuff like that, flicker effects. You can often run even your 1 to 2 basic land opponents out of lands and start just stone raining them repeatedly, kind of almost like the old Mana Denial D&T days.
Mm-hmm.
The big problem that I have with this card is that it's really, 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 and I cannot emphasize this enough, it is not good versus Scam. Scam is a 2 basic land deck that requires that you have very impactful interaction in the early turns of the game, and this card does none of that.
Yeah.
You blow up an underground scene, you turn it into an island or a swamp, and they can still cast most of their spells. This body is, well, a 2/2, flying first strike body does do things. It can help, stack block a grief and first strike it down. It can get in front of a frog even if it jumps, and then they have to discard a card to get through the White Orchid Phantom, stuff like that. But this is not something you want to be casting versus Scam. You would rather be casting, like a Spirit of the Labyrinth, or and maybe not an Orcish Bowmaster. That card's not very good anymore. But even like a Thalia to try to disrupt some of their Entomb, Animate Dead stuff, Containment Priest, stuff like that. You really, really need to be interacting with them in the early stages of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That's
think
my soapbox for this card.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think I think that the every instance I've heard of White Orchid Phantom doing anything against Scam basically involves another card also doing something, and it's the other card that's always actually good. Aside from any second creature allows this to block a grief. Sure, I get that. But yes, White Orchid Phantom with pre-war formal wear, making it a 4/4 first strike flying vigilance. Yeah, that's a pretty big body to block frogs with. But there are a lot of things that you can do with pre-war formal wear, notably get a removal spell and just kill it, right? So, yeah, fully in agreement. I think the thing that surprised, well, I don't want to say surprised. I know I went in the white cost made me unsure that it would really be playable in outside of mono white. Just because in a deck that wants to get basic swamp for Thoughtseize and what was Bowmasters but is now kind of another card that we'll get to. I wasn't sure the white cost was going to really be doable in splash builds, and I've kind of been surprised how much it does actually feel okay. Not in a main deck certainly, but I have been having enough success with it in the sideboard because it does actually fill a pretty big hole that the splash builds usually have, which is that they have much less interaction with lands as a card type than the monocolor builds do, because they don't have room for port, they don't have room for Ghost Quarter or Field of Ruin, whatever other interaction you might have. So I really liked having that in the deck, especially given that we'll get to the matchups we're going to be talking about, but a lot of them are pretty centered around few basics and a lot of pretty important basic lands, or non-basics. So
yeah. And like you mentioned very briefly, this card is obviously nuts with pre-war formalware, a card that I wish I could cast more, and I have yet to cast in the same deck as White Orchid Phantom. So just you blow up especially against something like Grixis Delver with like 0-1 basic lands. If you play it, shoot a land, it like blocks the Delver, and they have to bolt it, get out of the way so they can start attacking with their flyers. And then you 4 more it back, blow up another land, Freestone Rain. Now it's 4/4 first strike flying, so it's immune to bolt. It blocks DRC and Delver for free now. This card is really good versus like Post, Eldrazi, stuff like that you mentioned, where you want to be blowing up their lands.
Mm-hmm.
This card has a lot of good things about it. I also think that some people are maybe not respecting their mana bases enough. I think white is a very real mana cost, even for a mono white deck. And I've seen lists that are like 4 Wasteland, 4 Port, 3 Ghost Quarter, and I kind of clench my teeth a little bit. I think you're not casting this on turn 2 sometimes when you maybe want to.
Mm-hmm.
Even with just like a 4 Wasteland, 4 Port build.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do not have Planesborg yet, even though we deserve it at this point, right?
Yeah, for real.
And I think one important thing also that makes it better in the mono white builds is that like when your opponent is doing nothing special with their lands, being able to use flagstones as like a ramp, making this like a ramp spell, it's happened a couple times for me and it's been pretty good.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, I think that's about it for White Orchid Phantom. So we are going to move to the next biggest card that people have been talking about quite a bit in the deck, which is Felia Exuberant Shepherd. I think many others, and I know you, kind of went in assuming this card was. I'm not going to mince my words. I thought this card was horseshit, bad, just bad. How do you ever attack with a 2/2 in Legacy and like get value out of this card realistically? I think that we were wrong to a certain extent. I've found that this card is a lot more playable than terrible. That said, I've also, similarly to White Orchid Phantom, heard a lot of people talking like it's, it has broken the deck. It is the best card you can be playing. And I also think that is an overstatement. You certainly can get value out of it. It's a way to get a creature that's big is kind of cool if your opponent has stuff like Urza Saga tokens and Chrome Moxes and Mox Diamonds and stuff that like you can flicker for value. I think that's pretty cool. When your opponent doesn't have any of that and you're reliant on the cards that you play being flickered, I feel like it doesn't really work out a lot of the times for me because like the cards that you want to resolve to flicker with Felia are the same cards your opponent's already trying to answer all the time. And that makes me just want to play other cards that are guaranteed to get value when I play them, even if my opponent has a removal spell, which is the thing I think Felia kind of fails at, is like, oh, here's a 2/2, it gets bolted. Sure, that happens with a lot of cards in my deck, but most of our cards also, like, answer a card on the way out, right? If a Recruiter gets bolted, you've already drawn something. If Skyclave gets bolted, you've already killed something. If Flickerwisp gets bolted, you've already gotten some value out of it somewhere. The fact that Felia doesn't do anything until it attacks gives your opponent a lot of time. It gives your opponent an important window of interaction there, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and Flash does help mitigate that a little bit. Like, you obviously flash it on the instep, and then gets a little kind of pseudo haste. It's nice that you get to like front load this flicker effect. Like, you get to pay 2 mana, and then D&T generally wants to flicker its 3s. The 2s aren't as good for flickering anyway. So like if you go Felia into your 3 drops, it's a little bit better. I have felt a lot of tension with this card. First off, in respect to it being a removal spell. Your best, more than ever, I've felt that Legacy has put a lot of pressure on. You want to just kill all your opponent's stuff all the time as Death and Taxes.
Yep.
And Felia is a really bad removal spell. Outside of like Saga tokens and stuff, obviously it's amazing there. But if you can't flicker a Solitude with this until you hardcast your Solitude for 5 mana. That's just, you literally can never, there's no timing that you can ever do that. And this card is also very bad at flickering Skyclave Apparition. Because if you Skyclave anything bigger than a 1-drop, your affiliate is now attacking into the illusion and will die.
Mhm.
Unless you have, Caracas, or God forbid you have the Ganjo Castle or something.
Yeah.
So that's a big knock in my mind, is that I really want a lot of my cards to be killing the opponent's stuff as much as possible. And we will talk about that with like multiple other cards that we'll see coming up about I want to turn all of my cards into removal spells. And Felia is really kind of bad at that. It's a card that feels good when you're ahead, and D&T has traditionally never really been bad at winning when it's ahead already. Like, okay, yeah, I'm going to play my Felia into my Recruiter. My Recruiter's going to get a thing. I'm going to attack with the Felia, flick at the Recruiter, get another thing. And just like, if your opponent's not doing anything at that point, then you're already sitting pretty with a 2-drop plus a Recruiter, and like, you're not dying.
Right. Yeah. It's like the problem with a lot of win more cards. It's really easy to attribute like how like your win to that card when like a lot of things already had to go pretty well for this card to take over the game. And I have just not. I have, again, I thought it was going to be way worse than it actually is, but I still don't think it's actually a card I want to put into my decks for the most part.
Yeah, it's felt the way I was describing it when I first played it was like I thought this card was going to be unplayable, but it exceeded my expectations a lot. But unfortunately, that kind of made it okay. Like, I'm not gonna. It's not like it is not a D&T unplayable. It's not an Archivist of Ogma or a Deep Gnome Terramancer or a Tax Collector. This card is a card that you can put in your deck and not be embarrassed about it, but it's not something I'm excited to put in my deck, and I wouldn't be like broken up to cut it for basically anything else I'm trying to fit in it.
Yep. Fully agree. Which is unfortunate because it is a dog. But
it's such a sweet card. Like, it does so many like cool things too, and it's like legendary. It's cool with Caracas. It's got like all these cool things going for it. I just wish it was like a wolf, but I don't know. It's making waves in modern, so maybe it's good enough.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move on to a kind of boring one. It's Witch Enchanter. Take it away. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about this card, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I think this card is just like very minor, very marginal upgrade. I think maybe it becomes a better upgrade in the future, but we'll see. I think it's just an easy slam dunk one of in every Death and Taxes list for the rest of time, because it does the one thing that you really want it to, which is Recruiter for a land drop. Just something that D&T's never gotten to do, and oftentimes you kind of want to do if you just have a hand of spells. You're kind of clogged with the Recruiter of the Guards, and you just kind of want to hit a land drop. And then in mono white mana bases, it's not free, but it's close to free to play like 3 or 4 of these. And it's just like a good utility card. Legacy has a lot of enchantments and artifacts, and it's like, a land that you can pitch to Solitude. You can do like Flicker Wisp tricks where you play it as a land and then target your land and it comes back on the front side. You get a disenchant a little bit quicker that way. Yeah, like you said, it's not really like a huge role player. I think it would probably like influence the Beans matchup in a positive way, but I just haven't really felt that because Beans kind of died in the scam era. But like maybe in a future scamless world where Beans comes back and there's a bunch of like Beans and Leyline Bindings running around, and you just get to play 4 of these in mono white D&T, then you just feel a lot more favored there. That's kind of my instinct, but impossible to really know.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree across the board. I've one thing that's been nice, I think, is that like the thing that we got most out of Modern Horizons 3, I think, is more playable 2-drops. And the important thing about 2-drops is just like we're constantly figuring out ways to lower the curve, because the curve in D&T is like it is what kills us probably more than anything else. Is just like the inability to cast our spells because they're all too expensive, and we have like a hand that's just like full of 3-drops, and we never get to double spell, and then we just fall behind. The density of 2-drops that we have now has made me feel it's given me a lot of opportunities to play the land half of this tapped and not feel like it was a huge cost, which is the thing that I was a little bit concerned about going in, is that like, yeah, it can be untapped, but 3 life is like quite a bit for when we're usually just playing basic planes. And yeah, I've felt like we've been able to put it into play tapped without it hurting us too badly so far. However, I did once get my Witch Enchanter griefed, and that sucked.
Oh yeah, I've
There's my
definitely kept
second land.
hands that it's just like, oh yeah, Witch Enchanter, Aether Vial, Grief Reanimate. No more
Interesting.
lands. And then the other thing is that like very small tension that doesn't really matter. Specifically, is Leyline of the Void gets worse if you have like 4 Witch Enchanters in your deck because you're
Hmm.
already getting Leyline of the Void versus these like reanimate strategies generally. So if they Thought Seize or Grief or unmask your Witch Enchanter, they can target your Witch Enchanter and then bring it back and blow up your Leyline. Not something that matters a ton because Leyline's not very good against Scam anymore because of Psychic Frog, so it's not a tension that I've found. But 6 months from now, Grief's banned, Red Black Reanimator is the back to being the normal Reanimator deck. If we're not playing, and if we are playing Leyline in that stage, then there is a little bit of tension there.
Yep, fully agree. Anything else? Are we good to move on?
Yeah, not the most exciting card, but like just a very solid upgrade. Happy to see it.
Yep. All right. Next up, we have Wrath of the Skies. This card is tearing up Modern, and we also get to play it, although it's not as good there because we don't play any other energy cards. This is at first I kind of looked at it like it's kind of like there's a Pest Control is the card that I was trying out in some white black lists that felt fine, but like certainly incredibly good in some matchups, but once again, not great against Scam. Obviously, that was even before Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog, I guess, makes this like a little bit better, but not really. But like this kind of like it is incredibly good against any Urza Saga deck. Importantly, you can use it against Delver, very similar to Battle of Bywater, where it's just like 3 mana, not quite Plague Winds because that's Battle of Bywater just like doesn't really kill our own stuff, but it does something similar to that at least. You can scale it up against like I had a game against Painter where I cast it for X=3 and kind of just wiped the whole board, but that was fine because I killed like two Fables and like Saga tokens and an Urza Saga or something like that. And it was fine that I had to kill a bunch of my own stuff because it simplified the board in a matchup where like when the board is simple, we're usually fine. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be good. It might be good after Grief is banned, but I don't think you'd play it very much right now unless you're going again into a paper meta where you expect a lot of Urza Saga decks. It's great against lands, great against Painter. Those are the main two. It's very good against Stifle Knot also.
Yeah, it's pretty much like a kind of Pernicious Deed meltdown-y card, which is nice because some of like the faster as the Saga decks have been a little bit scary. The 8-cast matchup has been dicey at times.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like Painter, stuff that floods the board with a bunch of tiny creatures, even like Newton Elves or something. Theoretically, if Delver comes back in a post-Grief world, then you can cast this for 3 or maybe 4 mana to clear up DRCs and Delvers and Frogs and stuff. Yeah, it's a nice role player versus cards that have traditionally been a little bit of problematic. It feels like all of the upgrades that D&D got are basically just like anti-Urza Saga. Like we have Witch Enchanter, we have White Orchid Phantom, we have Wrath of the Skies. We're really good at blowing up artifacts and enchantments. It's just the other stuff.
Yeah. Coinman points out what I was about to say. Also, is that like an important thing compared to Pest Control specifically that I found was that like Pest Control killing the constructs was nice, but it kind of felt bad to cast it when you had to cast it, but there was an Urza Saga still in play that could make constructs. The fact that this also kills the Urza Saga is very important, I think, for how good it is against that card specifically.
Yeah, especially in the world with Lava Spur Boots.
Yes.
Blowing up the Saga is a lot nicer than Sorcery Speed. Kill some of the tokens, and they instead make a thing, untap, make another thing, boots up one, and attack you for like 12 still or whatever.
Yeah, not fun. So yeah, I think it might see more play in the future. Not really right now, but
yeah, I've definitely bought my copies. It's the card that I would definitely put in a lot of D&T side at some point. Just really not in the Grief meta.
Yeah, I have not bought mine because they're kind of expensive now that they're played in Modern. I kind of missed the boat on that one. Anyway, moving on to Vexing Bauble. I haven't played with this card a ton. I'm mostly bringing it up because I think there were some people talking about this card like it was going to be like a main deck four of kind of card, and I don't think that is at all the case. I think it's just a fine sideboard card that would be playable if any combo decks kind of, or any like spell based combo decks existed, but they don't, mostly because of grief. And maybe would be playable if grief were gone. Anything I'm really missing there?
It's kind of just like a Chalice of the Void, Deafening Silence side grade, or just like, good versus some combo decks. It's nice that it could potentially come up versus like Omnitel, where those cards are generally kind of bad. I guess Deafening Silence is okay there too, but I've been talking to Goblin Lackey Eli about it, and he's been playing a couple in like the sideboard of goblins, and he's been interested in it, and he like boards it in versus like Delver and stuff. And I've been kind of thinking about whether or not I wanted to try a sideboard plan versus Scam, where you got to like board in Vexing Baubles and you swap Surgicals for just all Fairy Macabres or something, because they do have like 4 grief, 4 force, 3 to 4 days or whatever every game. And like those cards are annoying to play around. So if you just go like turn one Vexing Bubble, hold up Macabre or whatever, then they can never like get it out of your hand. It's like got some interesting. If there's a ward where you can board it in versus a fair deck and an unfair deck, kind of like the old Chalice of the Void was a good card versus Ant plus Miracles back in the day.
Yep.
There's definitely room for this card, but it's definitely not like a big legacy game changer. It's scarier against in combo decks, not particularly for us, but like as a 1-mana defense grid in like Doomsday or half of the decks that Tony plays.
Yeah.
Luckily, that doesn't really affect us that badly. It makes Mind Break Trap a little bit worse if that's the plan, but those matchups aren't super great for us anyway.
Yeah, fully agree. My only other comment is that I'm glad that this card just like completely destroys Mississippi River, because that deck is stupid and I hate it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you want your creative technique hate, this is because then they can't even like, they don't always have like Force of Vigor. They have like Beseiju they can pop it with, but
yeah, I think it might just be Beseiju because you can't Force of Vigor with creative technique in your deck.
I mean, you can.
They can. I'm sure someone has, but you're not. You're probably not.
I've definitely been Pyrokinesis before, which at least doesn't get cascaded into, but can get taken into.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna type the next one in because I forgot to actually put this in a tab, which I feel very silly about because it's Emperor of Bones.
I can't believe you forgot Bones. The Bone Man.
I know. I like just wrote down a list of cards and it somehow didn't have Mr. Bones in it. I'll let you take this one away.
All right, so this is gonna maybe hurt some Felia fans' feelings, but I genuinely think this card is just what people want Felia to be in Death and Taxes. So we're switching gears here a little bit because we're obviously talking about a Black Splash.
Yep.
Not a mono white D&T card for obvious reasons. But this is everything that I want Felia to be, and what I talked about earlier of like every card in your deck is a removal spell, every card in your deck is like an individualized threat, stuff like that. Every card is impactful when you play it on turn 2. Emperor of Bones does these things, and Felia does none of them.
Yeah.
Felia is really bad with Solitude and Skyclave Apparition. Emperor of Bones is really good with Solitude and Skyclave Apparition. Felia doesn't do anything on turn 2. Emperor of Bones is, kind of weak, a little bit passive graveyard hate, but is graveyard hate. Starts taxing graveyards for, DRCs, Murktides, exiles creatures that are already there. Like, if they swamp cycled a troll and haven't reanimated it or griefed you or whatever, it can start picking things out of graveyards to make reanimates and animate deads worse. It's an individualized threat that doesn't rely on other stuff. It's by itself, it is a 2/2 that buffs itself to a 4/4 and doubles up an ETB from your graveyard. So it is kind of this synergy like Felia is, where it gives you this extra ETB trigger, all the way up to like I have both seen other people and myself like buy back a Yorion, flicker a Flicker Wisp and a Recruiter of the Guard, and then with the leave the battlefield trigger on the stack, the Flicker Wisp comes back and flickers out the Yorion, and you just drew like 500 cards out of your Emperor. Meanwhile, if you just top deck Felia in that situation, I guess when you have those other creatures, the Felia starts looking a little bit better. But if you just top deck an Emperor of Bones by itself, it gets the engine going, whereas Felia needs other cards for these additional synergies.
Yeah, like I have had plenty of games where like all I need is Emperor of Bones and 4 mana, and it just like completely changes the landscape of the game immediately, which is not something you can say about Felia. like literally from an empty board, just like 4 lands, play Emperor of Bones, activate it, take over the game.
Yeah, it does have some legitimate downsides, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest is that it really taxes your black mana.
Yes.
Whereas when we were playing just like Bowmasters or whatever, Vile's at like kind of a black source at that point. Emperor of Bones not only needs black activating costs, so it's like you need black mana in play, it's not just viling it in. You oftentimes need double black, because on
Mm-hmm.
4 mana, like you said, you want to play it and activate it in the same turn, that sort of deal. So there are definitely some mana base tensions. This card is absolutely not free to run and is pretty harsh on the mana base, but the power level is definitely there. And it definitely looks goofy on its surface, and a lot of people saw some of the Emperor of Bones list at the start, just like, what is this card even doing in the deck? But like it does a lot. It's a lot more impressive than it.
Yep. Fully agree. The highlight for me so far, other than I am one of the people who has been able to bring back my Yorion and just I just Crocus this in my hands. Um, I did have a game against a Moonstompy player where I Emperored their Fury, um, which wiped their board and put them to dead to their One Ring trigger in their upkeep. So that was pretty cool.
I got to. I think my best was, besides Yorion shenanigans, I got to steal my opponent's Slogurk and just ancestral recall 3 lands back from my graveyard.
Holy shit, that's sick. Yeah, I fully agree. It's a little harsh on the mana. One thing I've liked very much when I back when we were playing Bowmasters in the slot was that like the deck really was able to just run off of a basic swamp, and you basically never needed more than 1 black mana in a turn, past like the first turn or 2, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, Emperor of Bones makes that not true. If you do need 2 black mana in play, it hasn't burned me a ton yet, but it is definitely. I definitely have to get Scrubland a lot more than I'm used to. I'm definitely someone who gets like kind of addicted to just getting basics because I hate getting wastelanded. Honestly, one thing I like a lot about playing the splash list now is that like even though like counterintuitively you get wastelanded less because so many of your lands are fetch lands that are essentially virtual basics, you have a lot fewer like ports and Field of Ruins and Igonjos and things like that in your mana base that can just get wastelanded, even if it doesn't affect your ability to. It doesn't affect your like access to white mana. It still affects the total amount of mana that you have, which I have definitely felt at least in comparing mono white to black white. But I'm probably rambling a little bit. But yeah, this card's very good. I don't know if it will still be the choice after a grief ban, but I guess we can talk. We have a section dedicated to that part. Anything else on Mr. Bones before we move on?
I don't think so. I guess one thing. So if anyone in chat or watching this video later wants to ask, don't put Idyllic Range in your deck with this card. Just don't do it.
Oh,
That card's unplayable.
yes, very important. Yeah, just don't.
Don't play Idyllic Range. That card is not good.
If there were +1/+1 counter synergy cards we could play, I promise we would be talking about them here. None of them are worth it.
You don't play any of them.
Just it adapts. That's how it gets the counters. Moving on. Now we're getting into the set that everybody forgot about.
Not me.
What about Luminarch Aspirant? Oh no.
What about Luminarch Aspirant?
Anyway, the set that everybody forgot about, except for us, Assassin's Creed. There are, unfortunately, no white cards we're going to talk about. So nothing for mono white from this set, but we got something for black and something for red. We're going to start with black. We have Phantom Blade here. For those unfamiliar, this is a 5 mana equipment that kills a creature. That's 99% of what it does. I'm going to pass it over to you, JR, because you've played with this card more than I have at this point.
Yeah, I played a bunch of Leafs with this card like in the past week or so because I was just kind of interested in trying it out. It was mostly a joke at first because I was just like, hey, it's Stoneforgeable Murder. Just kind of want to check it out. But the thing that I keep harping on is just every card in your deck is a removal spell. You just want that more than ever. Everything needs to die in Legacy. Everything's creature based. You just need to kill everything on site. You turn Stoneforge into a removal spell. It's great. I just Stoneforge for this card a lot in matchups where I didn't want to race. GTA is really slow. Lion Sash doesn't do anything. You just grab Phantom Blade, and it's an instant speed, uncounterable kill spell. Sometimes it's a flickerable kill spell, which is really nice. You put it in with Stoneforge. You flicker Wisp it. You Yori on it. Comes back, shoots another thing. Like it does a lot of things. It is expensive. It's Batterskull sized. I think it's just a lot better than Batterskull. I've started cutting Batterskull from my decks even online just because that card is just not good anymore.
Unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Phantom Blade probably gets worse in a world where you could put Formal Wear in the deck, because Formal Wear is close to a removal spell. You can get back Skyclave or whatever, and it's a lot less clunky to cast your Formal Wear versus cast your 5 mana Phantom Blade. But at least online, if you're playing a Black Splash list, I think this.
Oh no, I think I lost you. Can you talk again?
Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Can you hear me?
You cut out in like the last few words you said, I think.
Okay. Well, yeah, I didn't say anything important. It's good. It's a much better card than it looks. It looks really goofy and bad, but it plays pretty well.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna also point out that like it's felt fine. I think getting rid of Batterskull makes a lot of sense when I think the big problem is that like in every deck that you need the life gain, your opponent is attacking you with cards you can't block. So
everything flies.
Everything flies. Yeah, it's just like
menace.
It takes so long to gain life from Batterskull. It is so frustrating.
Yeah, Batterskull has aged phenomenally poorly. Rhinos is the only matchup where you really want a Batterskull anymore.
It's like Rhinos in Burn, and nobody's playing those decks. So
yeah.
So yeah, I agree that I don't know if I would play it in paper over a pre-war Formal Wear. I guess one thing that we didn't talk about with Emperor of Bones is, at least in paper, that it does have a little bit of tension with pre-war Formal Wear, because you only are going to have so many creatures that go to exile for you to get with this, and there is a little bit of concern with if you exile a creature with Emperor that you then don't end up getting the opportunity to bring into play, then that's a creature you never get to get back with Formal Wear. I don't know how much that ends up mattering, but it is worth pointing out that maybe there's a world where the correct equipment configuration for a paper splash list involves cutting one Formal Wear for the Phantom Blade.
Yeah. Notably, Formal Wear has some dyssynergies with Bones, but also has some synergies with Bones, because obviously, you bring Bones back. It's a 6/6 now after you adapt it. It's enormous.
It's very big. So, okay. Moving on to other Assassin's Creed cards, we have Cassandra Eaglebearer. This card, unfortunately, requires all of you to read another card.
It's secretly 2 cards.
Hopefully you can read this, but I have another tab open for it. But basically, read this as 1 red-white for a 2/2 haste that puts this equipment into play.
From anywhere.
From anywhere. Everywhere except exile, I think.
Yes.
But if it's in your deck, it goes there. If it's in your graveyard, it goes to play. If it's in your hand, it goes to play.
Yes.
I played with this card a little bit. I played a sort of joke, not entirely joke, red splash list for the 4th of July last week. Overall performance on that list was not great. I only got to cast Cassandra against a moon stompy opponent that was dead to me doing basically anything. Um, the one important thing that I think I learned was that like the Spear of Leonidas, when you draw it, was not embarrassing to just cast and use. You know, it Sword of Fire and Ice is very close to my heart. It's been the hardest. I still haven't come to terms with the fact that we don't really play it anymore.
We just got a new super cool art too.
Right? Spear is kind of like that. I think the big thing that really helps is that like it's an attack trigger, not a when you deal damage trigger. Um, so you don't have to getting value out of it isn't predicated on like your opponent not being able to block it because of sword protection colors. Um, you can just throw, like, if you have a creature lying around that you don't care about, you can throw it into combat just to get triggers. Um, I had a game against, I think it was like some kind of control deck where the discard two then draw two. I just like looping it turn after turn, because importantly, if your hand is empty, that last mode just says draw two cards. Um, Only other thing I got to do with it, I think, was I got to put this and Jite on the same creature and double strike with Jite, which I had not done in like 7 or 8 years, whenever the last time I played Mirran Crusader was.
Shout out to Mirran Crusader. Poor guy.
Thank you everybody for the follows, by the way. I'm not doing a great job of keeping up with the stuff we're trying to get to, but thank you. I appreciate it from everybody. Yeah, there's also some extra text here on Cassandra where if you like deal combat damage to someone with a creature that has a legendary equipment attached to it, you draw a card. If you get to do that, cool, but that's not really why you play the card. It's kind of just like if you're playing a red splash list, there's a decent chance you can put 1 or 2 Cassandras in your list just because it's a good enough creature on rate. Not that it's like filling a specific role in the deck, but you know, this is a pretty good equipment to come attached to a 2/2 haste creature, basically.
Yeah. It's a card that I did have my eye on. Just it gives you a lot of stuff and asks very little of you in terms of deck building. Like,
Yeah.
Spear of Leonidas is, sizable comparison to the swords. Equip cost 2, casting cost 3. Like has a couple of different cool modes. Draw cards, make a board state, push damage with double strike. The flavor text on Cassandra, you draw a card. Probably doesn't come up with Cauldra, but technically does come up.
Yeah.
But if you're attacking them with a Cauldra and you have a Cassandra in play, you're probably good. You don't need to need to draw the card. But this is definitely basically what you said. Not a reason to play red, but if you're in red, you might want to put one of these in your deck. I think the biggest draw to red for me right now would be Pyroblast, and we'll talk about that when we get to the splash list again. But this is definitely just if this is in your colors, you might want to try it out.
Yeah.
Not an attractive card for like, oh man, I need to splash red to get access to this sort of.
Yeah. I fully agree in every sense. Speaking of red equipment, we're going to jump ahead a little bit to a card that isn't out yet, but got revealed very recently. In Duskmorn, which is coming out, don't ask me when, I don't know, later this year.
September 27th.
Wow, I did not expect you to have that date out of your head. So Chainsaw is another red equipment. It similar, we were just talking about Phantom Blade, where you just want all of your cards to be removal spells. Chainsaw is an equipment that bolts something. I guess lightning strikes. I guess if we want to, keep the mana cost into in mind here. But go ahead, because you wanted me to add this here. So
we keep like alluding to these decks that we're going to talk about, but like the red splash is at the back of my mind for a lot of reasons that we'll get to later. But by the time this card comes out, I think the red splash will be a lot better than it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
That means that I think Grief will be banned by then. But yeah, you just want to turn all your cards into removal spells in this meta, and it's kind of a cool card. 3 damage, very cheap, like 3 damage, 2 mana, flickerable, stoneforgeable. This card doesn't actually have any other text on it. You don't have to read all the equipped stuff and the stuff with rev counters or whatever. This is just a lightning strike that you can. This is a Oath of Chandra that you can get off Stoneforge stick. There's no other text on it.
Yeah. You say that now, someone's definitely gonna get like 7 rev counters on this, and then
I'm gonna equip it sometimes. I'm gonna have 3 mana sit down and rev my chainsaw with like 2 counters on it, and punch my Delver opponent. But it's not why it's there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That is gonna do it for all of the new / eventually will come out cards we want to talk about. But there are 2 that I want to bring up here because they are cards that are looking a lot better than they did before in the context of where the format is at right now. We're going to start. We're going to go back to 2000. Was it 2009 when this card came out originally? Anyway, Path to Exile came out a concerningly long time ago, and it is still somehow the best way to exile a creature for 1 white mana that isn't Swords to Plowshares. As we've been talking about, the entire Legacy format right now is about how much removal do you have against Scam and the tempo decks and things like that. Importantly, we were playing Battle of Bywater for a long time because it was a Plague Wind against Scam and Delver and decks like that. But Psychic Frog ruined all of our fun. We don't really get the chance to play. We don't really have the freedom to play removal that doesn't kill Psychic Frog, I think. You may disagree with that statement, but I think it's kind of true. And guess what? Path just does kill everything you need to for 1 white mana. If you are also playing White Orchid Phantom in your deck, then you do kind of quickly get to the point where like the downside on those cards isn't really a downside anymore. But yeah, you just need to be able to draw removal spells and cast them, and Path to Exile is still somehow the second best way, after Swords to Plowshares of doing that. So, you got anything else on that?
Yeah, Path is great. I'm playing like 3 to 4 in a lot of across the 95s of most of my D&T lists right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like you already mentioned, like the white, it's got some synergies with like White Orchid. Even in like the splash lists, like all the black removal, there's a lot of tension between cards that answer Frog that also answer like Troll and to a lesser extent like Murktide Regent.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about like Fatal Pushes and like 2 mana removal spells and Snuff Outs and stuff. Just nothing really does it quite as well as Path to Exile. Nothing has the ubiquity and being able to target everything.
Yeah.
And, like outside of just Scam, like Nadu is a pretty powerful deck right now. A variety of like weird strategies that haven't quite figured themselves out yet. And this is the best way to just point and click at every Nadu you see. Eldrazi is making a pretty big comeback. This card just answers everything. No like restrictions on what it can target. Like I cannot stress this enough. There's just so many creatures Legacy right now. It's crazy. It's like the only decks where you're not killing stuff is just like the new Post deck has like almost no creatures. It's just got Sowing Microspawn, and then just like the random one-off combo decks you'll see that just don't have creatures.
Yeah, and every other deck is just like it is literally a creature off until someone gets creatured to death.
Yes,
that's basically
so
how
many
it works.
Creatures that are extremely threatening if unanswered. Arose and Nadu.
Yep.
Trolls and Murktides and whatever.
Mm-hmm. And now for the other card. I know you have a lot to say about this, so take it away.
So, this card, really a diamond in the rough that the community rediscovered in like the Dreadhorde Arcanist meta, because Thalia was really bad against Dreadhorde Arcanist because 3 toughness was inconveniently one more than 2 power. Dreadhorde Arcanist cast the cards for free, so just for 1 mana through Thalia was not a big deal. So they could easily just like, even if they didn't have a lightning bolt for Thalia, they could just attack into your Thalia easily and cast their cantrip, find their lightning bolt eventually. Whereas Spirit of the Labyrinth bricks all their cantrips, and then obviously you can also trade with an Arcanist if they don't immediately have the removal spell. We now live in the second coming of Dreadhorde Arcanist in the form of Psychic Frog, where you play your Thalia against a Psychic Frog, and then they attack you, and then you can't block, because then they will just make it bigger and kill your Thalia, or they will jump their frog so they can draw the card, and then your Thalia does nothing. Whereas Spirit of the Labyrinth stops the frog from drawing cards. It's as simple as that. I do think people had started to skimp a little bit, myself included, on Spirit of the Labyrinth. The effect was getting a little bit less powerful. I now think that Spirit of the Labyrinth, it's a very good meta for Spirit of the Labyrinth right now. I would even be inclined to cut copies of Thalia in favor of playing 4 Spirit of the Labyrinth in my D&T decks. Some members of chat might disagree with my stance there for reasons that may be undetermined.
I'm just waiting for her to show up.
But I do think that this is not a Thalia is not that good versus Scam, I'm sorry to say. And Spirit of the Labyrinth is much better versus Scam. And even outside of just Scam, like against Nadu, obviously Spirit of the Labyrinth tragically does not interact with Nadu at all, but Thalia also doesn't really interact with Nadu. Like, the Nadu deck is really good at putting a bunch of mana into play, and Spirit of the Labyrinth at least stops these cantrips from, finding the second and the third and the fourth copy of Nadu after you target them all with your 400 removal spells that I keep talking about. Whereas Thalia just kind of doesn't do anything versus the Nadu decks. I think those are most of the decks that are like drawing cards at all. But against Doomsday or whatever, you're already dead, so it doesn't matter. But Spirit of the Labyrinth at least it gives you some amount of game after they cast a Doomsday and pass the turn. Whereas you cast your Thalia after they cast Doomsday, you just die. So
yeah, I think another big thing is because Bowmasters is so much worse as a card now. Not that like Thalia and Spirit both die to Bowmasters triggers just like equally easily, but a reason that like I kind of preferred Thalia is that like at least it could after a Bowmasters got cast, at least Thalia was like a good blocker for the Bowmaster and the army tokens. Now that you don't really have to worry about that, and like I think Spirit as a 3/1 body ends up doing at least like a little bit more than it used to, as opposed to just being a card that you never really felt like you could attack or block with ever. So yeah, I think Bowmasters being much less popular makes this card a lot less embarrassing also. Even though definitely. There's something still just like soul crushing about the fact that we're excited about playing our 2014 Hate Bear a little bit more again.
Yeah, I mean, I was complaining about playing my 2014 Hate Bear, playing this card in 2020, back when I was like, hey, we should put this card in our deck to help beat Dreadhorde Arcanist.
Yeah.
It's kind of embarrassing that this is like one of the best Hate Bears that you can play in mono way, right?
Yeah, sure is. Okay. That ends our opening section talking kind of about all of the new cards / sort of new cards.
I guess one small adjustment that I didn't add into the schedule that I just kind of thought about.
Yeah, what's up?
Kind of the opposite of talking about Path to Exile and Spirit of Labyrinth, talking about excited about that I'm less excited about is I wanted to touch on Canoptic Scarab Swarm a little bit. I personally have cut it from a lot of my lists, and that is 100% due to the card Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog lets you exile basically your whole graveyard, your own graveyard for free in chunks of 3, obviously. But like, I really like Scarab Swarm because it was a good card against the graveyard decks and the artifact decks, and it was an exceptional card versus the blue decks because like they would just there's constant graveyard churn in Legacy. The cantrip decks just get to like fetch Brainstorms and Wastelands, and Delver's playing Mishra's Baubles and stuff. You could pretty consistently make like 4 or 5 insects with this versus Delver Control, and it was a really good army in a can toolbox card for Recruiter of the Guard. Frog single-handedly stops Scarab Swarm from being very relevant. Against Grixis Delver, they now have, in addition to the Murktides, they have Frogs. Scam just has Frog. A lot of the other decks that aren't the control decks, people are like experimenting with like weird bug frog decks in lieu of traditional beans or whatever. Scarab Swarm kind of fell off, kind of hard for me. As excited as we were to finally get it when 40k came on, just please give us pre-war formal instead. We don't need to start.
Yeah. I was I had that secretly in my script because spoiler, none of the lists that we're showing tonight have Scarab Swarm in it. So yeah, I think another big problem is that like we have pre-war formal wear means that like exiling our own graveyard isn't free. Particularly if you're playing a black splash with Emperor of Bones, exiling your own graveyard is just like a non-option, basically. Um, so, yeah, I think it is not doing what it used to, and you probably should not be playing it in your decks right now. So, Hot Take was never that good. I don't know if I agree with that one, but. Okay, we're going to move on to section 2. We're going to start looking at deck lists. Give me 1 second because I need to switch something. Need to switch over. Can you see this, JR?
No. I heard the share screen noise. I mean, I can just see it on your stream, though.
Okay, cool. Then we're fine.
Good enough.
All right. So this is going to be a sampling of kind of like where our current thoughts are on a few different builds of D&T. We're going to start off with mono white because frankly that is what people tend to be most excited about is mono white. This is a list that is very close to what our friends and Chatter Hovermere took to a 1K this past weekend and did quite well with. Slight modifications because she commented on some cards that she didn't really like very much. Not to spoil it too much, one of those cards was Felia, so this Iganjo Castle I'm just going to turn into a basic points. And now we can talk about it. Yeah, I think that this is, very close to what I would play if I was playing a mono white list. Right now, this list only has 3 Spirit of the Labyrinths. You probably want the 4th, but I couldn't quite figure out, just from like changing her list as it was, like what the 4th Spirit would be. But yeah, I think this is a pretty great starting point if you're trying to get into playing a mono white list. As we mentioned before, the planes count is a bit lower than it used to be, primarily because you really want Flagstones of Trocaire in order to make your White Orchid Phantoms ramp spells when you need them to be. Aforementioned big pile of Path to Exiles in the sideboard because that's the removal spell you're really looking for. Also, a lot of Surgical Extractions and Fairy Macabres for the graveyard hate, as opposed to Ley Lines for reasons we mentioned before. That problem of Witch Enchanter destroying your Ley Lines when you play a Ley Line is even worse in mono white because you have a whole playset of Witch Enchanters to go along with the Skyclave and the Lauren and all that. So, would it be possible to post an image of these lists either on Twitter or the Decklist channel? Yes, I will absolutely post. I will definitely do that on Twitter, and I'll probably link to that tweet from the Decklist channel. I can do that. Importantly, the plate armors here, this is the proxy for pre-war formal wear, since...
Because it's not on Moto. Wizards of the Coast. I know you're all watching this. Every single WotC staff employee is in chat right now. I know it. Put it on Magic Online.
Literally begging you. Please. I even
Um,
I even like Hopium checked while putting this list together if like Formalware was like in like in the client even if you couldn't get it. It's not. I I yeah.
Watsy, I'll do anything you want. Literally anything. You name it. Name your price. Anyway, to touch on the Leyline of the Void thing, I forget if I mentioned aside of just like the dyssynergy with Witch Enchanter. The big reason I've been down on Leyline is because I used to be boarding it in versus Scam, and now I kind of hate it versus Scam in the Frog meta. So I have accepted the get grief scammed with surgical slash fairy macabre in my hand, and then they just take it and then they reanimate their grief and then take another one of your things. That's acceptable to me because I think those games are some of the most salvageable
Mm-hmm.
outside like compared to the ones where you get like frog plus force of will, you get entomb plus reanimated stuff like that. Those are the scarier games in my mind. So I like the 0 mana interaction for the entomb stuff and just accept that sometimes you get griefed and get got by that.
Yep, I agree. I think especially in mono white lists, it's important that like you can't really mulligan to Leyline. I don't think you could even mulligan to Leyline against Scam before Psychic Frog got printed.
Yeah.
And those games also go quite long because when things are in control, it takes a while for the game to actually be over. Um, which means that you're just gonna draw dead ley lines a lot of the time. And at least in the black splashes, you can cast those ley lines, but you can't here. They're just going to be blank pieces of cardboard a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think Leyline's just really, really fallen off in mono white especially, but in general, just not very interested in the card. A lot of the later the games go, the worse your Leylines are going to be, and it's basically illegal to mulligan versus scam at this point.
Yeah.
I am basically hitting keep on any hand that has 4 lands, 3 spells, or vice versa.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that it's enough.
Where's the Mindbreak Traps or Deafening Silences? Where are the decks that those cards are good against? Is kind of the follow up. Like
if your local events got a bunch of Storm players, got a bunch of Oops sickos, you can load up your Mindbreak Trap Silences, do whatever you want. The best thing about these lists is that you don't have to listen to us, and you can play whatever cards you want on the sideboard, whatever's going on. But these lists are mostly going to be pretty tuned for like we said up top. Targeting scam, it's the elephant in the room. It's the deck that you're really going to be targeting about. My mono white deck that I submitted for this portion is even more egregious than the one. This is the toned down version of mono white. My list that I'm trying for mono white has a second main deck Lion Sash, a main deck Path to Exile, a main deck Containment Priest. Like my lists are fucking decked to the gills to beat scam right now.
we will not talk about how many copies of Thalia are in that list. We will say
It's not 4.
It's not okay. There you go. Yeah. One thing I want to touch on. This is probably going to be a personal preference. I know that there are some lists that have Ghost Quarter instead of Port, specifically because there's value in having Ghost Quarter specifically so that you can kill basics after your opponent gets them with White Orchid Phantom. I personally prefer Port, not only because Port is sick and I love it, but because I think that it's important to not it's important to be able to interact with your opponent's mana and not just throw your lands away. And I just like that Port is, it is mana taxing that still keeps your mana in play for when you need it to cast spells. Some people might like Ghost Quarter more, but I prefer Port.
Yeah, I fully agree. I have not. My initial thought, and I think a lot of people's initial thought was like, oh, you play White Orchid Phantom makes Ghost Quarter really good. You can play Ghost Quarter, especially we're loading up on paths even. All these cards together are nice. But yeah, ultimately I think Ghost Quarter is just not really where it's at. Maybe in a world where, Urza Saga is coming back, less basics are floating around, you maybe want to try Ghost Quarters, but I've just been happy to play Ports when I've been trying Monoware. And also, again, reiterating again here, please respect your white source count. that White Orchid Phantom is a really hard card to cast, believe it or not, in your mono white deck. Don't be that person who plays like 2 Cavern of Souls, 4 Ports, 4 Wastelands, and Ghost Quarter, and Field of Ruin, and just all the cool tech lands. Just cast your spells. I'm begging you.
Let's be clear. By the strict math, using Frank Karsten's like calculator, this list does not have enough white sources to cast White Orchid Phantom onto over 90% of the time. It's like somewhere in the 80s, I think, if I remember right. But you need to be at, I think it was like 28 white sources.
Yes, I think it's 28. Yeah, and if you count like Vile as like half a white source,
Yeah.
and, the math is not like strict and clean. You don't always need to cast your White Orchid on turn 2, stuff like that. But there's a running theme of people not respecting their mana base, and I know I'm too strict about it. I can definitely be a little bit too aggressive in my tastes for trying to cast my spells on curve, but I know a lot of people are too lax. I don't like it.
Fully agree. And I think with that said, we're going to move on to the next list, which is going to be my personal favorite right now, White Black. This is the exact list that you trophied with very recently, within the past few days, I think.
Yeah.
Featuring Emperor of Bones that we've talked about, Phantom Blade that we've talked about. Mentioned earlier that we've also been trying White Orchid Phantom in the sideboard specifically of White Black. Yeah, is there anything in particular about this list that you want to call out that we haven't really touched on yet?
Not particularly. Like we already talked about, the Phantom White Orchid Phantoms in the sideboard look like a little silly, and they kind of are a little bit silly. But it's just, especially when you're playing online, there's nothing out there besides Scam. The format's like 50% Scam decks. You want to plan for Scam with your main deck as much as you can. But there are a couple decks floating around right below Scam, Grixis Delver, Eldrazi, Post, stuff like that. And White Orchid Phantom's like pretty good against a lot of those decks, so it's nice to be able to board it in rather than play all these cards that are bad versus Scam and then you board them out versus Scam. You just kind of play a bunch of this.
Yeah.
You could always just play, your Deafening Silence, your Mind Break or whatever, Customization is key.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess notably, Storm Thief calls out, are the Vistas better than Flooded Trance? Are they basically the same? This list is not. Oh yeah, this is the 2 Prismatic Vista list.
Yeah.
It's something that I kind of wanted to try out for a while, is retooling the mana base a little bit to support more actual fetch lands over Prismatic Vistas because of the double Shadowy Backstreet. Surveil Land has been really, really good, and I've really enjoyed it. I have been burned by it more often than I felt like I thought I would, but I've also fetched double Shadowy Backstreet in very long games against Scam so many times, and it's just been very good that I think I like this configuration a little bit more. It does make the mana base a little bit tighter. You have to fetch Scrubland a little bit more with your Emperor Bones, stuff like that. But Shadowy Backstreet, like the Surveillance, are just really, really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I made that to stay true to your list. I am personally still, like I mentioned before, the basic swamp is like secretly my favorite land in the deck, so I really like having the full 4 vistas. I think preferring to have more access to the duels, I think, is also totally valid, just not my personal preference, but a perfectly valid approach. As for cutting for formal wear, I meant to have my plate armors ready. Give me 1 second.
Close your eyes. Could have cut it random.
Yeah, my current list that I have in my deck box right now has formal wear over a Phantom Blade and a Jite. I don't know if I'm going to keep that or if I'm going to just have one formal wear and keep the Jite. Jite is not great right now by any stretch of the imagination. I think you can probably cut it from most lists online, specifically because, like, again, it's just not a good card against Scam. in a paper meta, if I was going to like a bigger tournament, like I have, I'm gonna be going to like SCG Baltimore later this month. I am certainly registering GTA in my 95 somewhere because who knows what somebody's going to bring to a paper tournament, right? You just don't know. Um, but right now, I think in paper GTA, the only things that like GTA is good against Nadu combo. It's weirdly okay against Eldrazi because so many of their creatures are 2/2s now. But other than that, it's just not very good. Um,
Yeah, GTA's been aging out for a while. I know a lot of the Japanese D&D players cut it over cutting Batter Skull for a while, even
mhm.
like before pre-war formal era. But I definitely agree. I've been thinking about cutting both GTA and Batter Skull from a lot of my lists, at least online. Just these cards aren't good against scam; they aren't good in the deck. Sort of mentality. GTA is a card that you could definitely put into a sideboard, just as a card that you want access to at some points, just not against scam specifically, maybe.
Yeah.
But even outside of a future scamless world, you're gonna play this card against Delver, and they just have like 3/3 DRC. They have Psychic Frog. They have Murktide. Like this card takes a while to get going versus Delver, even at that point.
Nethergoyf is going to be probably played a bit more at once the black tempo decks have to play a card other than Grief. Like, there's a lot of things that make the GTA look not very good. So, so yeah, I think in paper I would definitely still keep GTA in the 95 somewhere to be safe, but it is extremely cuttable online right now. Um, and I may have already said this, but like, the White Orchid Phantom in the sideboard, if you were like taking this to your paper local, I think these are the cards that are most cuttable for cards for like matchups that you expect that this sideboard doesn't cover. Notably, this sideboard assumes that spell combo doesn't exist because online it doesn't. But
Yeah,
who knows?
like
Maybe you have sicko storm players near you. Who knows? Anything else on that one before we continue?
nope,
All
we're good.
right. So this is a red splash list we're going to talk about next. This is
All right, before we get into it,
yeah.
I see chat asking a lot of questions. Some of these questions we may have already answered. Some we will happily answer again. We have a Q&A at the end after all this presentation stuff. So if you want to please hold your questions until then, I'm going to keep the momentum of the stream going here.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah. This is the red splash list. I think maybe slight modifications from the one that I played on my stream last week. Um, as always, the important thing, I think, like the first step of any splash, basically, is figuring out what one mana spell you get to cast off of your basic land on the splash. In black, it was Thoughtseize. In red, it's Pyroblast. In a theoretical blue list, it would be like Hydroblast, Spell Pierce, things like that. Full 4 Pyroblast, I think, is a lot, but,
I've played 5 in red splash lists before.
yeah. Pyroblast has historically been a really good card in Legacy. It's probably at close to the worst. I guess before Psychic Frog, it was probably the worst Pyroblast has ever been that I can think of.
Yeah.
And now it's like okay because of Psychic Frog.
This list specifically is something that I have my eye on. This Andra is that I think that this list is poised to be very powerful in a post grief ban world.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously very hard, nigh impossible to accurately predict what the meta is going to look like in a post grief ban world, but the decks on my radar are Grixis Delver with Frog, stuff like Eldrazi and Post and Nadu. And Pyroblast is really good against Delver with Psychic Frog plus Murktide and Nadu, obviously. One of the only ways to cleanly answer a Nadu without even like letting them get the draw trigger unless they have Delighted Halfling or whatever. You have Magus of the Moon, which is very powerful against Eldrazi and Post. I do. This is something that's at the very forefront of my mind. Is I I'm definitely going to start testing a list like this as soon as we hear word of a grief ban. But very disinterested right now because Pyroblast, while okay against Scam, they have so many powerful black cards. It's just you don't really want to run unless
Yeah.
if you can afford to.
Yeah,
The
I think
the
I
thing that
played against Scam once when I played it, and I boarded them all in, but it really felt like I was kind of flipping a coin as to what half of the deck that they drew.
Yeah. The thing that I'm always trying to answer is that I don't splash lists just because, I want to play Cat Moon, put this card in my deck. I try to answer questions or like answer problems with these splashes. I've splashed red in the past specifically because, hey, Pyroblast looks really, really good against a lot of the problematic cards that I'm dealing with right now. Like when we splash black, it was like, hey, if we main deck Thoughtseize and Orcish Bowmasters, this answers a lot of gives you leeway in fast combo matchups, while also Bowmasters being really good in the meta of a bunch of Bowmasters decks and stuff like that. So if you're splashing, you do need to be focused on why are you splashing, not I want to play the fun card. I see people kind of talking about Flage, and Flage is a cool card and a fun card, but I don't think it answers any problems. It doesn't really have any internal synergy with the deck. D&T's not a deck that can fuel its graveyard for or for escape or whatever very well. It's not tutorable, obviously. You really want to be focusing in on why am I splashing? What cards do I now have access to? It's what cards do I want? There's one more card I trophied with a red splash way back when Bombardiers just got printed and it was all the rage. I trophied with the D&T list with Bombardiers. It was mostly a meme. I have aspirations of formal wearing back of Goblin Bombardiers, attacking them for 4 and then throwing the formal wear at them for 5 for a huge 9 damage burst. It won't be good, but I will do it at some point for the fan.
That's fucked up. I love that though. Yeah, agree on all points. One other card I think you've played before in red lists is Hammer Mage. Is that what it's called? The meltdown spell shaper.
Yes. That's the one.
Which could be a card we play, but there's no real reason to play it right now. But it's another reason it could be one later.
Yeah.
And I think we only have one more list to show off, and it is a sacrilegious 60 card list.
It's a really bad one.
I have a lot of respect for this deck being probably the most coherent 60 card list I have seen since Yorion was discovered. I think it has a very clear idea of what it's trying to do, which is just cast a 2-drop on turn 1 that has a really big impact with his fast mana with Chrome Mox and Lotus Petal. Just cast a turn 1 Thalia, cast a turn 1 Spirit, cast a turn 1 Leonin Arbiter against decks with fetch lands, things like that. I think that if you want to play a 60 card list, it should probably look something like this. I think I admittedly don't pay a lot of attention to 60 card lists because I'm both not interested in them and I don't think that they're good. I see a lot of them just look like 80 card lists scaled down to 60, and you should not be doing that. If Recruiter of the Guard is still in your list in a 60 card D&T deck, you're doing something wrong. I'm pretty confident in making that statement. You actually played with this list, so I'll let you fill in anything, but anything I missed, really?
No, you're pretty spot on. This deck, while it's not really it's kind of a horrible bastardization of D&D at this point. There's no Aether Vials in it. You could play Aether Vials in lieu of Lotus Petals or something. Obviously, this is a pretty rough framework, yoinked from JWVH, I believe, Jamie, another D&T appreciator. But the idea is here, and that's just fundamentally do something different than what your D&T is doing, and that is very aggressively attack attacking your opponent's resources, like old D&T with Wasteland, Ghost Quarter, Leonin Arbiter, White Orchid Phantom, stuff like that. If you want to do that old cool Mana Denial, Stone Rain time sort of stuff, it was very fun. It's very sick when I was doing it. There's maybe a world where this is playable. Again, like a lot of things, it's not the scam world. Don't play this deck in the scam world. It's not good.
Yeah.
Half your cards don't have text against the scam deck. Just if your game plan isn't going to get scam, you probably should figure out a different game plan, and that's kind of the whole issue with this D&T list right now. But like maybe if Delver, if they ban Grief and Grixis Delver becomes tier 1 and it's got 0 basics, then like White Orchid Phantom Ephemera is just really, really messed up, and your Mana Denial plan is like maybe good. Definitely not the world right now, but for the 60 card believers out there, maybe after the Grief ban you can try again.
That all sounds about right to me. I will not touch this list, but it's there if you want it. And I still think, even if I don't think it's very good, it's probably the most coherent 60 card list I've seen.
It makes sense. It has an idea and executes that idea. Whereas every other 60 card list is just, I don't want to play Yorion for reasons that I cannot explain to you. And I will just make a 80 card D&T list, but not have access to Yorion.
Yep.
You should not do that.
And that is the last list we are featuring. If you missed any of that, I will be putting. I'll have images of the list posted to Twitter. In the VOD, I'll probably have links to either that tweet or to like the lists on Flex Letterboxd Field or something like that. So now we are going to get to our section about matchups against the most popular decks.
All right, can we take a little break before that so I can run to the bed?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a break for take however long you need. I'll keep the crowd busy.
All right, sounds good. Don't talk too much shit about me. Oh, fuck, Toast just showed up?
Oh, shit.
It's over.
Worst time to say that. Oh, no. Oh, no. We're destroying him. Toast, no, don't do that. Get him. Toast, he's a guest. Yes, we did talk about Felia. The first section was talking about basically all the new cards. Check out the VOD when it's up if you want the full explanation. A very shortened version of it is, we thought the card would be terrible. It is definitely better than that, but I do not think it is good enough for us to be interested in putting it into our lists, basically. Certainly not as a 4 of. No mention of Urza Saga. Not really interested in Saga lists. Didn't talk about Ajani because there's like some very loose thoughts about Ajani, but as of now, I don't think it's a card worth talking about. If we're talking about Sanctifier and Core, it's the card's fine. It does and doesn't really solve. Or did I say Encore? Yeah, NVEC. It doesn't really. It's an okay 2-drop against Scam, but it doesn't fix all the problems, especially now that Psychic Frog exists. So Ophelia is better with pre-war formal wear, but also every card in the deck is good with pre-war formal wear, so that doesn't really feel like it's not a strong argument to me. Let me put it that way.
Dog, get out of my chair. What are you doing? All right, we're back. How much shit did Toast talk?
Toast timed you out. I'm sorry.
Wow, that's so fucked up.
In paper, I think you start with 2 formal wear. There's a possibility that you only play 1 formal wear, specifically in black splash lists that are playing Emperor of Bones. It's possible that that's just too much. You're relying on your graveyard too much, especially doing the same thing. But anyway, are we good? Good to continue?
Yep, ready to go.
All right. Now we're going to talk about the decks in Legacy, or more importantly, the deck in Legacy. As mentioned, scam is everywhere. If scam is not everywhere in your paper meta, I'm sure it's not. It's probably not in a lot of places because most people are sick of this card. But unfortunately, on Magic Online, people play the best deck, and the best deck is scam, and it's not close. So here it is. The big thing that changed the scam matchup for basically everybody is Psychic Frog. That card kind of single-handedly fixed every weakness the deck had in a single card. It changes a lot about how we have to sideboard against them. It's kind of a big old headache of a card. Other than that, the deck isn't that different from what it was before. You know, it's still a Grief and a Troll deck with Animate Dead and Reanimates and Entombs for Archon and Atraxa. Probably the biggest... the other big change related to Psychic Frog is that the card that was cut for Psychic Frog is Orcish Bowmaster, a card that's mostly just in the sideboard right now. So the deck is actually quite low on removal, especially pre-board, which has been sort of interesting, but it is only interesting when you don't get Entomb Archon, which does not happen very often. Or it happens basically every game 1 that I have against Scam personally. What do you think about this matchup, JR?
So, Psychic Frog was a pretty huge upgrade of this deck. I do think, like someone in chat just mentioned, Moon Zombie was genuinely, I think, favored by a pretty significant margin against Scam pre-MH3, and that's how I qualified for the showcase that I top 8'd back in May. And now Frog just completely flipped that matchup on its head. Frog is nigh unbeatable for that deck. Extremely frustrating. Deck has truly no bad matchups. If anyone is telling you that their scam matchup is easy, that they're just farming scam players, then good for them. They're probably not right. Maybe they're farming, like league scam players or local scam players. But if you're getting into like round 5 or 6 of a challenge or whatever, you start playing against the names that you recognize, your scam matchup's going to get a lot worse in a hurry. I think, personally, D&T has a pretty okay scam matchup. I'm never going to claim that it's easy, that it's a buy, that I'm going to farm every scam player that I meet. I have a positive win rate against scam across a bunch of leagues that I've been playing lately, trying to test for the aforementioned showcase, for stuff like Gen Con. I think my scam matchup is acceptable to myself as a player, but your scam matchup's never going to be good. It's just, this deck is very clearly tier 0 and is basically going to be farming everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I have any more of my rant on that. I think Pre-War Form War is a notable, pretty significant upgrade in the matchup. I played against Scam like 4 or 5 times back in February. When's Jarvis's 7K? Whenever that was?
May?
This is like the same month. Was that really May?
Yeah, it was May.
But I played against Scam like 4 or 5 times, and I beat it all the way up until the semifinals. And Form-Aware was no small part of that. Just the redundancy is really, really powerful, because when you're playing with really good 2-drops and they grief you and stuff, the ability to bring any of them back, bring back stuff like Lion Sash that gets answered, or stuff like Containment Priest, yada yada. Formal is a really good upgrade that you just unfortunately just don't have access to online. Extremely frustrating. But like I said, I think D&D's matchup is okay. The things that you are scared of more than anything are the Entomb starts, the starts where they just a reanimator deck, and like a uncontested Psychic Frog, where they just bury you in card advantage pretty quickly.
Yep.
So the game plans are don't let them do the Entomb thing and kill Psychic Frog on, which is the reason we've switched from Battle of Firewaters to Path to Exiles. The reason we're playing a bunch of 0 mana exile, like graveyard stuff in the sideboard to beat the Entomb cards. We're not as scared of like Grief Reanimate starts. Obviously, Grief Reanimate coupled with one of those two other plans is very scary, but just Leyline's really fallen off. They have a bunch of Borrowers. They have Psychic Frogs. You can't mulligan for them. I think I've found what I would consider a pretty consistent, happy plan for this game matchup, and you just kind of have to hope that it works out.
Yeah, that is the thing that sucks, is that nothing is consistent against a deck that can just him you on their turn one. Just what are you gonna do, right? But yeah, I agree that like the matchup is fine. I think it's as consistent as it can be, in the sense that like no other deck can have the density of removal that we do, and the game really is just about how many removal spells can you have and successfully cast versus their number of creatures and spells that protect their creatures. And short of like, I mean, I hesitate to even mention this because Beanstalk decks are clearly not beating Grief. They're clearly getting absolutely destroyed. Beans decks are nowhere. But like, short of like Leyline Binding, drawing 3 cards off of Beanstalks against a troll, like no other deck really can like have that density of top decks that kill all of their creatures as consistently as we do. So yes, the VOD will be on YouTube tomorrow. As I mentioned, Bowmasters are in the sideboard now. I'm not even 100% sure if they bring them in against us.
They always bring. I don't know what they board out, honestly. I always get Bowmaster, Dothy sideboard planned, and they still have Entomb, and they still have 4. And they also like Dismembers and Veil Pushes. They just have 68 cards whenever I play against Scam. I don't know how they sideboard. I don't get it.
I was gonna say the same thing. Yeah. One thing I have noticed recently is that like a lot of lists, this one it doesn't specifically, this is the one that won the showcase last week. A lot of lists go up to 4 Brazen Borrowers. And I think that's important to point out, just because like a lot of times against Scam, petty theft does just feel like a Doomblade. Like you rarely ever get the time to like recast your cards. So it really does just feel like a counterspell, essentially, which has probably been like the toughest part of the deck for me. I think is just like the density of bounce spells makes it really hard to manage a board state that can contend with their stuff when your removal spells then get countered. But yeah, stupid deck. It will theoretically not be long for this world.
Yes. I know some people, myself included, are coping that it will get banned, that Nadu is such a problem in Modern that they will emergency ban it, and that they will just tack Grief on. I think if they do an emergency ban for Modern, they will tack on a Legacy ban, but I am coping that will happen. I don't think it will happen.
I agree. I agree with everything you just said. So yeah, Scam, stinky, stupid, best deck in the format. We are only even able to be here talking about this because we have an okay Scam matchup.
Yeah, if you're playing online, I would aggressively slant your main decks to beat Scam. It's somewhere between like 40 and 50% of most tournaments at this point. It's just, it was 6 of the top 8. It was 17 of the top 32 decks of the last showcase challenge. It's won 2 or 3 of the last 4 last chance qualifiers. I know Eldrazi won one of them. I know Scam has won 2 of them. I think there was a 4th one, but I don't know the result.
There was a Nadu deck won one of them.
Oh yeah, that's right. Nadu won one of them, and then there's the 5th one going on right now, as of an hour and a half ago or something.
Probably.
No, the 4th one is happening now, and then there's a 5th one at like Wednesday at like 4 a.m. or something. I don't know, but it's just everywhere. It's always winning.
Yeah.
I've been playing main deck Container Priest, second copy's Alliance Sash, stuff like that. A bunch of like stupid stuff. It's a bad time.
Yeah, I have not seen a deck this dominant in a long time.
Yeah, not even like at least in other dominant metas, there were 2 decks at the top, like White Plume Adventurer and Blue Red Delver. There was Luris and there was Zerda. There was Underworld Breach didn't really get to stick around long enough to be like 50% of the meta. If Underworld Breach had existed for 6 months like Grief had, then it probably would hit that point. But combo decks also don't hit this critical mass that these like Days Forcible decks do, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to play them. But yeah, Breach was legal for like a month and a half and got axed. So
yeah, and like even looking at like I don't know that Sensei's Divining Top, like Top Miracles, was even like as dominant as Reanimator is now. It's just that Top Miracles was the best thing to be doing for like 5 years, and eventually we had to put an end to it.
Yeah. Like Deathrite Shaman was at least in like Check Pile and Grixis Delver.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think of any other. Oko was in Rug Delver and Snoko. So most of the other dominant decks were like at least separated between 2 distinct entities. Just not there right now.
Yeah. I think it just slowly culminated from Scam into, oh yeah, we can just play Entomb Animate Dead. I don't think there was a card that got printed.
Yeah, it was like people were playing like the old blue-black Scam lists when they were just playing like Grief and Murktide, and then at some point someone put into the Entomb package in, and then it was like pretty slow. I know some people were experimenting with it, even pre-2023 Eternal Weekend. I had seen some lists that were Scam Reanimator, but it really didn't start like snowballing until January, February.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was solidly the best deck around MC Chicago. I think is when it really started taking off.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
In February, and I lost to the deck.
Yeah. To be clear, we're talking about when Scam became Rescaminator, not when Scam became a deck, because Scam clearly became a deck because of Troll and Bowmasters.
Yes, Critical Mass of black cards was very good for Grief, which was otherwise pretty unplayable outside of Red-Black Reanimator as another unmask.
Right. So yeah, I'm done talking about Grief.
Yeah, we just fucking move on.
Now we can move on to Grixis Delver. Probably, I think it's like the second most popular deck, approximately, but it's weird because like a lot of the people who would play a deck like Grixis Delver are just playing Scam instead.
Yep.
But I picked this list because Jujubin is incredibly good at Legacy.
Unbeatable. One of my arch nemesis, him and Wonder Bro, who I have basically never beaten either of them.
I think Jujubin has some specific things in his list that aren't necessarily common. Like his Delver lists always have the basic island.
I've heard a lot
he
of people
really likes his main deck Pyroblasts also.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people specifically about like Grixis Delver with Frog say that the mana base is really rough. I don't know if you can afford to have a basic island in the deck. I will not be surprised if the Grixis Delver Hive Mind settles in on 0 basics, unless if Grixis Delver's the top, then D&D comes back in a big way, plays a bunch of like white Orchid Phantoms and stuff that maybe their hand is forced and they have to have a basic island because they get stone raided too many times. But this deck definitely doesn't want to play Basic Island in their Dragon Race Channel or Psychic Frog.
Yep, fully agreed. I think we'll have to see where things lie again post ban. I think weirdly, despite the fact that Psychic Frog is in the deck now, giving them like another pretty busted threat, I have honestly felt like this is one of the better Delver matchups we've had. Like, not necessarily on the scale of like Ragavan Delver was like, I think the second best Delver matchup we've ever had, a second only to like 2013, 2014 era Rug Delver. But I think between the fact that like their mana base is super vulnerable to the White Orchid Phantoms that are in many of our lists, they're playing so many creatures that their Delvers are so fucking bad at flipping, especially blind.
Yeah.
Psychic Frog actually puts a lot of pressure on their DRCs and Murktides to actually stay delirious and have enough spells in their yard to make Murktides big. I don't know. I feel like the deck is pulled in enough directions that I found like, despite the clear power behind it, it's a lot harder for them for all of their pieces to fit together against us. I'm curious what your experience has been so far.
I have not played against this deck a lot, but every time I have, I've completely crushed them into the dirt. I would be ecstatic if this became the breakout list of a post-grief world. If like this is the new king of the castle, Grixis Delver is really good. D&T would be a phenomenal deck to be playing, especially like a mono white build with White Orchid Phantoms and stuff, or a red splash build with a bunch of Pyroblasts for the threat suite of Psychic Frogs and Murktide Regents.
Yep.
I would be extremely excited to play in a Legacy the best deck. A lot of people are scared of Psychic Frog as like this is the second coming of Dreadhorde Arcanist. It does have some notable downsides against Dreadhorde Arcanist, where Dreadhorde Arcanist can clear its own path with like flashing back removal spells. It's not it was immune to, it was a unpyroblastable threat. It had 3 toughness instead of 2, which obviously isn't that relevant because Psychic Frog can buff itself, but like Psychic Frog has a lot of notable downsides over Arcanist, to the point that I haven't been scared of it as the second coming of Dreadhorde Arcanist yet. I'm perfectly willing to be wrong on that front, but it's really hard to say because Scam is just oppressing things so much that it's almost impossible to speculate on at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Again, basically everything you said. I think the fact that Frog actually has to hit the opponent as opposed to Dreadhorde Arcanist just having to attack is like so different, because at least decks can put creatures in front of Frog. Even if it's not profitable immediately, it's like a way that like a fair creature deck can contend with a Frog, whereas against Dreadhorde Arcanist, there's just nothing to do. They just get the value every time, and a lot of times that value is killing the thing that could have blocked it. Like you already mentioned. So yeah, I agree. We'll see. I think that I am guessing Frog will feel like Dreadhorde Arcanist to a lot of other low creature deck blue players. And you know what? Sure. Every card like that is going to feel the same, right?
It is a very scary card that can definitely, but I'm not sure that it is, too broken. We have to ban like Dread was. My expectations are that, and my hope is that it will just become like a pretty reasonable role player in like a variety of decks. Maybe without grief, you can play like a blue-black deck. Maybe like people usually pair, Delver with Lightning Bolt. Mm-hmm. But if you play like, Nethergoyf, Delver Seekers, Psychic Frog, Murktide, your mana base gets a little better. Maybe you're a little bit against White Orchid Phantom, stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's room to experiment post grief where I'm okay. Some people are like, banning grief's not enough. We gotta ban another card from Scam. But like, just ban grief. The deck falls apart. We get new decks. Maybe Psychic Frog's too broken, but it's hard. It's really hard for me to take anyone seriously that just I know exactly what, like, this card is, it's going to be too good even if we ban Grief. Because who knows what the meta is.
Yeah, I feel like anybody who thinks that Grief, like banning Grief, doesn't like significantly affect how significantly affects Scam, like the deck only works because it has a density of black creatures that both pitch to Grief and put themselves in the graveyard for your reanimation spells. There might still be a good deck from that shell, but it's gonna be built very differently. Like,
And it's no longer going to be thought seizing you twice on turn 1.
right, and like,
And
is Troll even worth playing in a deck at that point, or do we just go back to playing Dark Ritual and just going super fast with Black Red like we used to? Like, the the deck stops having a plan B, sort of. To even call it a plan B is weird.
D,
Right,
and
like it has to fundamentally be built differently. So
I do love that we've circled around to complaining about Scam again in our
it's just so hard not to.
You can't escape it. It's so hard to talk about anything in Legacy right now without turning it all around to Scam again.
No. Anything else on Delver before we move on?
Please let this be the best deck of the format. Please, everyone, pray that Delver becomes king again, because DNT will thrive in this world. I can all but guarantee it.
We are always good in matchups where Delver is the best deck, or in metas, I should say.
Almost always. I'd say Brand 6 Delver is pretty terrible, but
okay, that's the one exception. But yeah, even Oko Delver was like still a good matchup.
Yeah,
it was
I maintained that Yori on DNT was like secretly favored against both Snoko and Delver.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it's a secret. I don't know if we fully ironed it. Like I wasn't playing. I don't know if it was like fully ironed out in the end, but like the signs were clear.
I got my 6th stream with Honorog where we had Luinol, Ved. Luinol got to just beat the shit out of Snoko for like 4 rounds. It's great.
I think about that a lot. That was eye opening for me at the time, and I've never looked back since. So
good times.
All right, moving on to an old favorite for some that has a lot of new toys in it. Cloud Post is probably the one deck that's changed the most, both in terms of the cards it plays and how good it is. Because this deck used to be a Green Sun Zenith deck with Primeval Titan and Elvish Reclaimers. And now it's just like all weird artifacts. The big changes to the mana base here are the Planar Nexus. This is just an image, so I can't show you, but this is the land that's all land subtypes, which means that it's all of the Tron land types. So Planar Nexus plus Urza's Tower is just 4 mana on turn 2, basically. Which lets them do things like cast a big Kozilek's Command, or cast a One Ring, or a Karn, or whatever. Sowing Mycospawn is probably, like, I imagine, the single biggest thing for this deck. Yeah, all the non-basic types. Yeah, right. Sowing Mycospawn is probably like the card I'm most surprised by how good it's been in both this and the next deck we're going to look at, which is going to be Eldrazi. That card's fucked up. I don't like it.
It's really good, yeah. Not like this deck got so many upgrades at MH3. I think it's just so fast. You have Vexing Bobble and Disruptor Flute too. Like this deck used to be just a 4 main deck Pithing Needle deck to not get wastelanded, but now Disruptor Flute's a Pithing Needle that also you can have a chance against, spell based combo. Vexing Bobble is both a it's both a 1 mana defense grid for this deck versus Forcible, and also like extra combo hate that you get to play. Yeah, this deck is like pretty sick.
Yeah, I think probably I haven't actually played against it yet, I don't think.
I played against it once, and I was on like black white with no white orchid phantoms in the sideboard. I just got fucking mopped the floor with. It's like we talked about black white historically, very bad matchup against decks that you need to interact with lands. This is a matchup where you would absolutely want stuff like White Orchid Phantom, especially even like Felia White Orchid Phantom. This is one of the rare matchups where your opponent's not going to be interacting with your stuff a lot, and you do want kind of this recurring engine where you get to just stone rain your opponent a bunch of times.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that like I haven't played against this build yet. I don't know if this is true at all. One thing that I remember always thinking was kind of funny about Post is that like the matchup was bad because they went bigger, but there were also like there's also like a theoretical endgame where like you can just solitude all of their Eldrazi and leave them with very bad ways to actually kill you. And then the fact that this build of the deck doesn't even have any Primeval Titans or like Elvish Reclaimers to beat you down with kind of makes the idea behind that plan a little bit more sound, because like they don't even have a way to like get your removal spells out of your hand before an Eldrazi is in play.
Well, they can always kill you with Karn, right? Like Karn Lattice.
Yeah.
You tag you the 6/6.
Right. Yeah. Like Karn is definitely the like next best way, I imagine. Like I basically I see myself probably dying to Karn Lattice more often than I see myself actually dying to an Emrakul.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is why I'm glad that this build of it, like this specific list, only has 2 Karns, so that doesn't happen as much.
Yeah, this list is a little weirder than I know some of the stuff that Futurism's been cooking. He's got like the plows and the planes in the sideboard and stuff, which were not in the initial builds. But, I do think, just looking at this deck on paper, I think the D&T matchup gets worse. Like for them, I mean, it gets a little better for us because their payoffs are more interactable. Previously, it was just D&T's really slow. They're just always going to cast Primeval Titan, and then you're just always going to die because you have no ways to interact with it. But just like you have ways to fight the One Ring, and you have ways to fight Karn and stuff. It's not the scariest engines in the world in a deck that has like a bunch of like Skyclave Apparition, other stuff. Notably, like Source Plowshares used to be much better. Obviously, this deck is essentially creatureless, so Micah Spawn and Elvish Spirit Guide and the Eldrazi don't really count.
Yeah.
Whereas you used to be able to like plow Elvish Reclaimers, try to trip them in the early turns. Like plow into Stoneforge for a Cauldron Curve was usually like what you wanted to do, and that's not really the case here. I do think the One Ring, especially if Spirited Labyrinth is coming back, so like the One Ring Karn stuff is just like a little bit more interactable in ways that I like.
Yeah. I also think their mana is like a little bit weaker. They have more ways to generate mana, so they're not like as weak to just like Wasteland on Cloudpost / Surgical on Cloudpost. But I definitely have like thoughts about, it's very easy to disrupt Planar Nexus plus Urza's Tower because you kill one and the other doesn't do anything. Which is different than like, oh, I Wasteland one Cloudpost and they go down from like 7 mana to 4 or whatever. But we'll see. Again, just thoughts. I haven't played this matchup yet, but I imagine that will matter a lot, especially if the average list is playing 4 White Orchid Phantoms. So
yeah, fully agree.
We're going to move on to a different kind of colorless deck, this being Eldrazi. I talked for a bit there, so I'll let you start off. I'll let you start us off here.
So this is the other deck that got like a bunch of MH3 upgrades. It is one of the other decks that has been managing to contend with Scam. I won't say that it has a good Scam matchup because I don't think it does. But it has been up there. It has been doing okay in some events. And is just fully taking advantage of a bunch of soul lands plus all the cheap Eldrazi. We're not even playing Reality Smasher anymore, which is like wild to think about. We've just slimmed down the curve a lot. Glaring Fleshraker is really, really messed up in this deck. This card is kill on sight. It is another one of the big reasons that I've moved from Battle of Bywater to Path to Exile. It's a 2/2, and also you often just want to kill it instantly before they can cast a bunch of spells. I've seen people just go like Flesh Raker into into a creature, into another creature, into Sowing Spawn, into like Thought-Knot Seer, just into a big K command, into a big K, I guess Causeless command. K command's not a very good shorthand, huh? Kolgon's command and Causeless command now.
Not anymore.
um, Kozilek's like curving Kozilek's command in modes, make a bunch of scions. Is it scions? Does it make scions? I
Yeah.
think it does,
Or
right? Because everything
spawn.
else makes spawns. One of the cards makes 1/1s, everything else makes 0/1s. I forget, but yeah, like because you just choose the 2 modes, make a bunch of creatures plus scry a bunch draw cards. So it often just goes make a bunch of creatures with my Glaring Fresh Record in play, ping your opponent for like 6, scry 6, whatever, dig to your next Kozilek's command, sack all of the spawns, cast another giant Kozilek's command, ping your opponent down a bunch more. Like it's just like this huge burst. I've seen people kill him like turn 2 with this deck sometimes. It's kind of nuts.
It's fucked up. I hate Eldrazi with every fiber of my being, so the fact that they managed to make this deck good again and in a different way brings me no... It brings me no joy. Things that I think are sort of interesting is that the average creature is a lot smaller than it used to be. Like you mentioned, they aren't even playing Reality Smasher. So like our deck contends a lot better with it in combat, generally speaking. Especially now that we have White Orchid Phantom's a good card against this deck because they have a lot of important non-basics. Killing Ayabugan on sight is something you basically always want to do. And a 2/2 First Striker does pretty well against a lot of parts of this deck. Not all of them, but certainly like being able to block Glaring Flesh Raker, things like that. That said, it really does feel a lot of the time like you will feel like you're okay, and then you're just dead. It's you just explode. Mostly because of Glaring Flesh Raker, but also because of Line Breaker. Like they just can generate so much damage out of nowhere. It is truly unbelievable to me. And even when they're not doing that, they're still thought-knotting you, and now they have Sowing Myco spawns. I literally got Myco spawned, kicked, kill my lands, they get a wasteland, and other lands, and it was just the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying.
So I've mostly just been losing to this deck, but I don't think that's like a full but I don't have enough like experience to say for sure whether or not it's good or bad. Notably, the land count in this deck has to be pretty high, which means that like they are pretty reliant on a card like Kozilek's commands to keep going in the mid game if you answer their first few creatures. But
yeah, my instinct is that this matchup is good, but I have not played enough to feel confident. It's definitely a matchup where you just want to hold up as interaction at every point of the game forever, and eventually they will run out of gas and you will kill them after that. Like I've seen people die because they didn't hold up their Sword of Supply shares because they thought they were safe at like 12 life or whatever, and you just get blown up and annihilated. You just need to. It's similar to like a Turbo Depths matchup. You just need to like be walking this tightrope of I need to be constantly afraid of getting like fucking end step giant causes command untap double line breaker or whatever, make 2 huge tramplers, Flesh Raker into cast 5 spells or whatever, or blow you up out of nowhere. This deck is like they are low on card advantage. I would say no card advantage even. It is just relying on casting the spells that it draws, and you can obviously cast Cosmos Command just to make a bunch of spawns and scry to your next thing. But my instinct
Null
is that
Drifter is advantage, but that's the only source.
Yeah, you can cast your divinations, and if you get to that sowing mana, I mean, you have a lot of mana in the deck, right? If you kick a Sowing Mega, especially, you're good. You can pretty easily kick a or whatever, kick a Null Drifter, hard cast it. Um,
I've also
but
found
yeah,
Wastscape Battle Mage to be like so fucked up. That card
yeah,
is so
exiles
good.
it exiles your equipment, so you can't even like call for them anymore.
Yeah, you can't culture them.
It also bounces, so you double can't call for them. It also
Yeah, it's bad.
so they could like just shoot your Vial and your Germ, or they could shoot your Cauldra and your creature. Like it does have some like pretty annoying stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little worried about it, but I think I have to acknowledge I probably dislike this deck on like a spiritual level more so than this matchup is bad, if that makes sense.
Also relevant to point out that if you have pre-war Formalware in your deck, if you ever play a White Orchid Phantom and then you just like block with it and it dies and you Formalware back, they can just never attack you again for the rest of the game until they cast like a Battle Mage or something.
Yeah.
Because you have a 4/4 flying creature, flying vigilance first striker that just blocks everything in their deck. And also blows up 2 of their lands, notably. I don't know how recent this specific list that you grabbed was, but I've seen a lot of them cut the basic forest here, and they just have basic waste, which kind of makes sense because the basic forest is kind of weird because you only really want it for the sowing maggot spawn to go find the basic waste under like a blood moon or something.
Yeah, this list is from the 3rd, so about a week old. It's one of Max's lists.
Okay, yeah.
So
I think some more recent lists I've seen have been cutting the basic forest specifically, which is nice if you're on a White Orchid Phantom plan.
yeah, Max being Max Dortion on Twitter. He's been mentioned in chat. He's been working on this deck quite a bit. So
Yeah, he's been one of the front runners. Him and I know PVDH has been playing a lot of Eldrazi of
okay.
like a little bit different builds, but similar enough.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, worth noting also Kozilek's Command also kills your call.
Yeah, basically, your living weapon equipment that used to be very good in this matchup are now terrible for like 7 different regions.
Shout out to Batterskull for sucking in yet another matchup.
Yeah, right. It used to be incredible because like I don't want to say incredible, but like it was the way that you could stabilize after like killing the Smasher. You know, you would their Eldrazi mimics would like just eventually be 2/1s and you just get to start attacking, but like now it's just bad.
I would be stunned if Kozilek's Command gets banned. If not Oz. I do not think it's that good.
No.
It's really hard to get a card like that.
All right. Moving on from Eldrazi, I've looked at this deck enough. Cephalid Breakfast has gotten quite a big upgrade in this card that has been tearing up Modern. Nadu Winged Wisdom. This card just kind of like fits very nicely into Breakfast because the cards that combo with Nadu are the cards that you are already playing in Breakfast for the Breakfast combo. So this kind of gives the deck like either a plan B or a plan A, I guess, depending on the way you want to look at it, of just like, well, if I'm not milling my deck and dread returning a Thassa's Oracle into play, then I will just like draw 6 cards a turn or whatever. I only have, I think, a couple matches against this deck so far, and I think it changed the matchup a lot. And definitely made it worse for us, although I'm not sure where we end up on it yet. But like I think the thing that made Breakfast such a good matchup, particularly when we had Bowmasters in our deck, was that there really wasn't anything stopping you from just holding up removal for forever and just waiting for them to try to go for the combo and killing it. It kind of forced them to only go off if they had a Teferi or an Orim's chance to protect their combo turn. Now that they have Nadu, it really forces our hand. It like gets our removal out of their hand while drawing them cards and kind of clearing the way for the combo that way, which has felt pretty rough for me, at least so far. How has your experience against Nadu Breakfast been so far?
Yeah, I fully agree with all that. I think Pre Nadu, I was pretty happy with all of my breakfast matchups with like any like mono white, black white, red white. The splash lists both got like pretty significant upgrades versus breakfast with Pyroblast or Bowmasters being really, really good against it. But the addition of Nadu just taxes DNT on the exact axis that I felt it was favored against breakfast, and that is, million removal spells. Surprise, surprise. Um, and Nadu is a card that is obviously very good against removal spells. And even if we have a million removal spells here, you have to target the Nadu. They drop windows to get down the Cephalid Illusionist and combo kill you. So my instinct is that the Cephalid Breakfast matchup was favored for DNT previously, and Nadu has definitely drastically. You are how much that your win percentage has gone down is yet to be seen. I've definitely not played against this card at all enough to know that for certain, but definitely a lot scarier matchup. Nadu, I've already talked about enough, but is one of the reasons that I'm zeroing in on Pyroblast as a potential post-grief ban option. I think if you put Pyroblast in your deck, and also Magus the Moon notably, while generally not the best against Breakfast, most of them aren't playing the basic forest, so if you just like Magus them completely off Nadu, you just have to worry about regular Breakfast again, which is kind of nice. In addition to Blasts obviously being nuts versus both Illusionist and Nadu.
Yeah, their mana with Nadu definitely is a lot worse.
It's unfortunately not really worse enough to exploit with something like White Orchid Phantom, because they're usually on like 3-ish basics.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure. This matchup feels worse, but we'll see. I don't think we're gonna really know by how much until again after Grief gets banned. But yeah. I think another reason to have a lot of paths, because you just want to have even more removal in your deck, particularly removal you can cast at instant speed. Their mana is a bit worse, but they still, like you just said, have enough basics that like White Orchid Phantom isn't that great. Although I think Magus of the Moon and Red Splashes looks better.
This is notably one of those many matchups where like White Orchid Phantom looks a little bit bad. They're Nurse Saga deck, so you can obviously blow up those utility lands, but like there are like White Orchid Phantom is a good card in a lot of matchups. This doesn't really feel like one of them. Matchups where your opponent has 2 to 3 basic lands are generally the ones where like I just really am feeling the burn of like trying to put White Orchid in the deck.
Yeah. In a post-grief world of Nadu piles end up being a top deck, do you end up considering Suppression Field?
I would never put Suppression Field in my
not,
DMT in my Aether Vial, Mother of Ruin, Swordforge deck. You just play like Pithing Needle, Disruptor Blue if like Nadu's a huge deal. Or again, Splash Red, play Pyroblast.
Yeah, I agree. Similar, but a bit different. There are also some more fair Nadu decks that have been seeing some play that don't have a combo kill like Breakfast in them, but still kind of try to go off with, using the same cards, using Shuko and Nomads and Core to draw a bunch of cards. The difference here being that instead of winning with Breakfast, they kind of win with an overwhelming amount of resources. This specific list doesn't have it, but I've seen a lot of lists that have Field of the Dead as their sort of win condition. I've even actually played on stream against a list that was not Breakfast, but had a Thassa's Oracle in it to just cast after you've gone off.
It's probably going to end up being like a modern thing where it's like you play Thassa's Oracle online, but in paper you could probably play like an Odawara and a Boseiju and blow up all their lands and bounce all their stuff with some like stupid Nadu endurance loop.
Yeah. This shell doesn't feel as good to me as the actual Breakfast lists. But again, don't know for sure. I think the main thing is that like they are, when you have the removal spell for the Nadu, this deck is a lot worse at winning the game after that, because Cephalid Breakfast can very quickly present a problem that they've already like taken your resources away. But if you just like path their Nadu and they draw a card, what are they gonna? They're just gonna cast like a Stoneforge Mystic. Like there's a million decks that have tried to kill us with card advantage, and that doesn't work against DNT. Like they need
Yeah.
to actually have cards in their deck that end the game, and
Yeah.
this specific list doesn't really have that.
Yeah, I think our point of view as D&T players is very very tainted, and will inevitably not be the determining factor on what Nadu deck becomes like the best
Mm-hmm.
in the future. I think the less relevant threats you have in your deck, the worse you are against D&T. Obviously, I would play against this deck against Breakfast. I'd just be much happier because not every deck gets to play, 4 Plow, 4 Solitude, 3 to 4 Path to Exile sideboard, Skyclave Apparition, Recruiter the Guard, blah, blah, blah. Mostly it's just like 4 Plows and like 4 Leyline Bindings or something. And you can exhaust the control decks out of removal spells, or it's like Delver has nothing because they just have Lightning Bolts and just have some sideboard Pyroblast or whatever for your Nadu. So in those matchups, something like this is maybe more reasonable because the Breakfast stuff is like more clunky and bad, and but you can still fight the Nadu axes first a lot of the fair decks. I will be happy as a D&T player if these fair Nadu decks stick around over something like Breakfast because of the lower density of the end game ending threats and higher tax on like you need to have the answer right now every time.
Yep.
But yeah,
Fully.
it will definitely not be us because we almost never govern what's happening in the meta. We try to take advantage of it where we can. Whatever Nadu deck rises at the top will certainly be based on whatever deck lines up a little bit better versus stuff like Delver.
If DNT dictated what these cards looked like, the 4-color control list that only won with Uro and Minskin Boo never would have been anywhere close to playable. So, and that's kind of like a good example of like why this kind of deck doesn't always work against us. Is that like I mean, obviously that specific list was weak to Caracas more so than like basically any other like non-combo deck, but yeah, you just need your cards to actually win the game. You can't just draw cards to death.
Yeah, it's like the one, exactly one copy of Fourth Airlingus and all like the Beans decks. Just if you didn't have that card, your matchup against D&T plummeted legitimately like 30% because you could never actually win a game.
Yep.
But with this hard to answer point of it, like just on turn 40, you will cast a fourth for 20, and then your D&T cannot interact with it at all. Like it sometimes that people do drink their respect D, bring stuff like that to the table, or very occasionally D&T is good enough where like Delver starts sideboarding Torpor Orbs, and you feel really good about yourself as a D&T player that you've accomplished something.
Yeah, right.
But generally, it's just that they're going to do what's better against Delver. It's fine for us.
Yep. And one more deck to talk about, unfortunately, is the other Grief deck that's been seeing some play. Oops All Spells plays Grief now. They just have so many black spells to exile thanks to 8 new MDFCs with Fell the Profane and what's the other one? Boggart Trawler. Playing Grief to enable Calling the Weak. This deck it hasn't put up like insane results compared mostly probably because like it's not, I mean, I guess it's like okay against Scam. Like they can have some because they are themselves a reanimate deck. Sometimes like they can get there, but yeah.
It's kind of a meme right now. It's one of the playable, but I would be surprised to see it floating around more than just like randomly KOs you in a league. Like it randomly KO'd my trophy match last night when it turn 1 to me into Grief turned 1 to me. It's a frustrating deck, but at least this specific variation will die as soon as Grief gets banned. I know Faulted Form has been experimenting with like a blue-black version, with thanks to the wide variety of MDFCs, but jury's out on how playable that one will be in like a post-ban world. But
yeah, I know he mentioned that like his is definitely like a slower build, but he prefers that anyway, whereas this is like the exact opposite. It is.
Yeah.
I didn't know that like oops could be faster than it already was, but here it is. Like
Yeah.
this deck has never passed the turn against me, unless
Mhm.
they've mulled to like 4.
Yeah. It's certainly terrifying. And I am hoping that I won't have to play against it too much. It's a deck where if you were like really trying to test this deck, you would play Leylands again, but unfortunately, Leylands just kind of bad versus everything else. So you just kind of have to deal with putting Surgical and Fairy Macabre in your deck, and then losing degree time.
Yep. And I wish there were more decks to talk about, but unfortunately, Scam is like 40% of the meta or whatever. So that's all we really got. There are a couple other decks out there, but they're just not really worth talking about until Grief isn't suppressing what everything else is able to do.
Yeah,
Um,
there are a lot of cool MH3 cards that just aren't really being innovated versus Scam enough. Like I know Newton's playing with Nantuko, whatever
mhm.
it's called, Spring Heart Nantuko in his like Cradle. I never want to call it Cradle Control.
Yeah,
his Cradle Green Sun Zenith deck that he plays.
yeah.
Um,
I
I
stopped calling it Cradle Control specifically because it frustrates me that MTG Top 8 puts his deck under control, but DNT is still in the aggro section.
and then also DNT just gets put as Abzan Stoneblade whenever you splash colors.
Okay, they did do one thing good though. Mono white Stoneblade is now what they call 60 card DNT.
Okay, that is really funny.
Yeah. Um but yeah, that's about it. And I think at this point, even though we have talked about it quite a bit, the only thing we really have left on the agenda is, again, the elemental in the room. Grief is not going to be legal past August. There's a BNR scheduled for August 26th, I think,
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
Um, there is essentially no world where Grief is not banned. Then, if it isn't emergency banned, before then, if we are so lucky, things are going to change. How much do we want to talk about what might change after that? I'll let you start off this discussion.
I think we've kind of talked about it a lot already, just kind of based on talking about everything else. We've talked about the decks that we think are reasonably powerful, stuff like Eldrazi and Post Nadu and stuff like that. Um, I I think DNT we've talked pretty at length about what DNT will probably like. I think black gets worse. I think red gets better and mono white gets better. Um, we've already kind of beaten a lot of those points into the ground. I don't know if there's anything specific to an unbanned meta that might be able to just open that up to like part of the Q&A at the end.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to ask about like certain thoughts and feelings about certain things in the post ban meta.
All right. I also think we've pretty much covered it. So yeah, I think we can say that we have finished all of our prepared content for the evening. So now we can throw it over to chat for Q&A. Any questions that haven't been answered, or if you've been saving them, please dump them now, and we will take them one by one.
Or if you have asked them already in chat and we just ignored them, please feel free to ask them again. Don't feel bad about spamming or whatever.
Yep. Violet Terrapin, you asked, have you guys considered one Boggart in white black? My basically the way I've looked at it is the reason that Witch Enchanter is so easy to fit in the mana base is that like the worst case scenario is you just kind of replace a basic plains, right? Um, the white black lists really can't support a second only black land in the mana base as it is right now, which means that you really have to cut a real card for Boggart Trawler. And when you start looking at real cards, Boggart Trawler is very similar to Canoptic Scarab Swarm, which is a card
Yeah.
that we are already not playing anymore.
Or if for some reason you wanted a cheaper version of the Tormod script effect, there's like a white-black legendary human
Mm-hmm.
2 mana that like ETB Tormod scripts or something. So it's not an effect that you're really looking for, and it's
Yeah.
not a land that you're looking for. So both halves are like pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
The only really arguable stance is like a recruitable black source, but that's like extremely niche.
Yeah. Um, let's see. How much have you actually tested mono white, Felia? I played a decent amount of it until I just got frustrated that it felt like mono white. Like none of the cards that like we got to start playing in mono white felt like it made sense. It felt like it really mattered against Scam because the format just solidified around Scam being the best deck really fast, and so mono white just I kind of lost interest in it pretty quickly because of that. Because I don't think that Felia or White Orchid Phantom are particularly good in that matchup. So I've tested some. It's been fine, but yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying mono white again. Like I played a bunch of black white recently, delving back into mono white after testing Philly initially, and just I just truly don't see the vision of people who are just like this bananas. This card's like just incredibly good. We have to like play a bunch of copies. Most people I talk to are approximately of the opinion of this card kind of sucks to like this card is okay at the very best. There's like a very small subset of people who are like this card's just bananas, so good all the time, and I don't see the vision. And like so many people that I talk to and I trust about DNT's opinions also don't see the vision. I'm gonna continue probably like trying a couple of copies for a little bit longer. I don't know, the vibes ain't there.
There's a couple different questions around the grief ban. I'm going to try to answer all of them right now pretty quickly. I don't care if they ban anything more than grief. If they do, sure, whatever. They might have to address more stuff after grief. We'll see. I'm not really worried about that because I would rather have any problem to solve other than grief right now. And I think anybody talking about banning Bowmasters is I don't think it's a serious position to be holding anymore.
They're not even playing Bowmasters anymore. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if WotC was like, we're banning Grief, but then we're also just banning Bowmasters because of the inevitable like swing back of Bowmasters in the format, and people start complaining about Bowmasters being ubiquitous again in a kind of like Dreadhorde Arcanist ban sort of way. I don't think they will. I don't think they should. But I wouldn't be shocked based on like public opinion of Bowmasters being so low.
Yeah, my thing is that like I'm not even sure that Bowmasters is good after the grief ban. If the best deck
like,
is Grixis Delver with Psychic Frog, a card that Orcish Bowmasters is very bad at answering for 4 different reasons. Like, I don't know. I don't see it personally.
yeah, some people are also talking about like a reanimate ban. I don't believe her in ban. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Speaking of, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything else.
Okay. Speaking of MDFCs plus pitch elementals, is that combination for other colors and inevitability? Can you clarify that question? Yes, sink into stupor and subtle. Like the MDFCs are good with the pitch spells. Yes, I agree. I'm not sure I'm not sure what the question is.
I think it's yeah, to answer it to the best of my ability, I guess. I think you will basically see like 6 to 8 MDFCs in almost every Chromox deck, almost every like Chromox Stompy deck in Legacy for the rest of time. I know from my experience on Moon Stompy, Sudden Eruption's a really good card there. Whatever black Stompy decks may exist, will definitely want to be playing Boggart Trawlers and the kill spell, whatever it's Fell the Profane, stuff like that. I had my meme blue Stompy list that I don't think is very good, but the blue MDFCs were good. I think if I ever get a white deck to work, then the new MDFCs are very good there over Amaria's Call, which is completely unplayable. They are a huge windfall for Chromox decks, and you will be very happy to put them in those. The power level of those Chromox decks remains to be seen. Except for Moon Stompy, which has been decidedly hammered into the ground by the existence of Frog, and will continue to do so until until Frog starts seeing play.
Yeah. Got a question about the blue splash for Soul Herder.
This
I
I got this. All
You got it.
right.
Go ahead.
This goes exactly back to what I was talking about when I was talking when we were looking at the red splash list. Is that I never ever am going to splash because I want like Soul Herd is this cool card that like does cool things in D&T. I splash colors in D&T because I want to solve very specific problems in the deck. And if I were to splash blue, it would probably be looking for stuff like Meddling Mage or Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm or Hydroblast, things that try, or even like the blue Magus, Harbinger of the Tides or whatever. The cards that solve problems that I am actively looking to solve outside of the stuff that Mono White has to. So maybe Soul Herder would end up in a blue splash list. It would not be a reason I want to splash blue.
Fully agreed. Yeah, I think like I actually wrote this in an article recently. Like the thing that is going to always, I think, dictate whether or not a splash is good is the power of the 1 mana spells you get to play off the splash color, not the 3 mana value cards you get to play off of it. Question is the same way Grief plus Fellow Profane Bogger Trawler exist in current decks. Will the comparable blue or red combination exist and list together? Yeah, the answer is yes, they already do, basically. Like, Moon Stompy is a deck primarily built around the ability for MDFCs to be lands or colored spells for pitching to Fury or Chrome Mox. That used to be a thing for white when White Plume Adventure was legal. Now that it's not, probably not seeing much there. There are sort of blue stompy lists that have existed. I guess like on this stream, xJCloud is probably the one who has imprinted the most MDFCs from the Zendikar Rising cycle than any other human on this earth. Because you've done it in literally every color.
Yes, that is true. I think blue is probably the worst to do it in because your pitch elemental is really bad. Subtlety is not a very good card in Legacy outside of like I've seen it in Doomsday sideboards for very specific reasons, obviously, of interacting with hate creatures. But like you're gonna play the MDFCs because your white Chromox deck wants Solitude. You're gonna play the MDFCs because your red Chromox deck wants Fury. You might not play the green MDFC. I guess your green Chromox deck might want Endurance. I don't know. The last green Chromox deck I had Endurance. The green one of the green MDFCs was really cool for that deck too. The fight spell. It's like 2 and a green. It's like gives your creature +2/+2 and fights the thing. That would be cool for the return of Dinos and Trinispheres.
Dinos and Trinispheres. Fucking godlike deck.
I don't think that deck's coming back anytime soon, as cool as it was.
Yeah, unfortunately not. You played that in like a challenge, right? I remember watching the stream.
Yeah, I went like X and 3, I think. I think I went like 6 and 3 in a show. It was sick.
Mono white list. Yeah, I'll show this. I think if you're playing, the role of plate armor is a proxy for pre-war formal wear. That's all it is.
Don't put plate armor in your.
Yeah, let's be clear. Don't put plate armor in your lists. This is for formal wear.
What does this card even do?
It's
3/3 ward 1. This is fucking bullshit.
Yo, the equip the equip has affinity for equipment. I fucking love that. That's sick. Anyway, I don't think it's weird to put White Orchid Phantom in your sideboard in general. I think if you're doing that in mono white, that probably is kind of damning of whether you should be playing mono white at all. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
White Orchid Phantom is a very powerful variety of matchups deck at utilizing White Orchid Phantom. If you don't want to be putting White Orchid Phantom in your main deck, then you should maybe look at what other 2 drops you want to play and potentially like be on splash for other better cards.
Yep.
And then you can play White Orchid Phantom in the sideboard like we have in like the black splash list.
Yep. But yeah, I think if you don't play White Orchid Phantom in the main deck of a mono white list, you kind of run into the problem of like, well, okay, you're basically playing a pre MH2 mono white list at that point, unless you're playing like a bunch of Felias. But we've kind of already talked about how we're not so keen on that idea from our perspective. So. Can you get a refund because you already bought 4 plate armor? No.
Has anyone been annoying about Samwise yet? Not really.
I haven't heard people talk about Samwise in a long time. But yeah. I guess they're probably going to start now.
Samwise people coming back. I think it's a little bit more awkward because there are worlds that I've like so basically the surveil lands are really good, and even in mono white, just like you could play like Samwise and some fetches and a surveil land and stuff, but it's not really quite there. Samwise is good with like Urza's Saga, and maybe even Good's a stretch there, but maybe you could build a mono white Saga list again. But Saga's pretty at odds with White Orchid Phantom for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's something that you could cook up like that, but
I don't know. Samwise has the exact same problem that I've always felt that it has, which is that everything that you can do with it proactively outside of a deck with fetch lands is just like really not that impressive. Like if you get to bring back a Solitude with Samwise, okay, that works. But like you needed the Solitude to be in your hand in the first place for Samwise to do anything. And if you use your Solitude and then draw a Samwise, it doesn't do anything. It just I think there was like the very first iterations you had of a black splash before you figured out that like Thoughtseize main is just like the way to go when you're playing Samwise, and it felt okay in that list because it kind of with a bunch of fetch lands in your deck, you kind of smoothed out your mana a bit. I think it did an okay job at doing that. Other than that, I think it's just not good. I don't believe in anybody who thinks that like Samwise looping Wastelands is a coherent plan in general. Let alone in the current format where things happen so fast, and as we keep mentioning, everything you have to do is just having more removal spells than your opponent has creatures.
Yeah, and having impactful things to cast early. Samwise is like clunky value card.
Do you think mono white will be a thing after Grief goes, or like the black splash too much? I personally still really like the black splash, but I'm going to be trying out other things after Grief goes, depending on where the meta lands, basically. In paper, I think I just have to like buy Pyroblasts, I think, to have a red splash, basically.
And Cassandra.
Yeah, and sorry,
Eagle Bearer.
I forgot I hadn't ordered Cassandra yet, but
not a believer.
But yeah, I think I could see any of those builds ending up on top after a ban. Yeah. It's just hard to guess at what the actual distribution of the top decks are going to be. What decks could come out of the woodwork without the best deck hemming everybody every turn one. It's hard to say for sure. Yeah, I think there's going to be merits to all of them, and it'll take some time to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm a much bigger believer of mono white in a post ban because, as I've said many times, I think the power level of mono white lives and dies based on how Phantom is, and I don't think White Orchid Phantom is good in this scam world. And I think it's poised to be pretty reasonable in a post scam world.
Yeah. Thoughts on the Bloomburrow removal / blink spell? Let
Just
me.
the white one gives your opponent a fish if you want to kill a thing. Otherwise, it's a blink.
Yeah. I don't remember the name, but I remember the Oracle text. I'm just gonna try to find it here. Parting Gust. There we go. I think it's okay. I think like the flicker effects have always had this kind of problem where like you need to have something in play for it to be good. We were talking about how that's why we don't really like Felia. But at least this can sort of be like it's basically a crib swap, but one less mana. It's like okay, I like that it is modal, but I don't know that there's it's not really a thing we're looking for. I don't think. If it was like a creature, maybe, but just a random spell in our deck that does this, I don't really think so.
If you think about it, it is pretty comparable to Touch the Spirit Realm too. Like flicker / remove spell split card.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously a little different, a little cheaper. Counterable, gets snatched by Thalia. Generally speaking, all the flicker effects have been like kind of hard to hold up. D&T's and Legacy in general are super mana intensive. Even like Ephemerate is a really powerful card that just has never really made it in D&T, and I don't think like a more expensive Ephemerates that have modality are going to be worth it. I do think Ephemerate is a really good card that just somehow hasn't really clicked yet.
It did exactly once. Let me take my credit. I was the one person playing TNT when White Plume Initiative was the best deck, and Ephemerate was actually really good then. But that was to solve a very specific problem, which is that you needed to have ways to get a creature that could attack into play as fast as possible, and Ephemerate was a 1 mana way to do that with Solitude, basically.
Yes, that is true.
And notably, Touch the Spirit Realm felt so much worse at doing that job, which is why I tried it once and hated it.
2 mana is a lot more than 1. I say this frequently. 2 mana is not double. 2 mana is like at least triple the cost of 1. All right. Shout out to Defiant Cathar in chat also. L, for those of you that know on Twitter. L is one of the people I spoke to at length about D&T preparing for this stream, and one of the people I definitely trust the instincts of when it comes to Death and Taxes stuff.
Thank you for calling that out, because I saw her say hello and then forgot because I was too busy talking.
I didn't want to ignore the hi, but we got on our tangents.
Is it insane to put a single Surveil land in your mono white deck with 4 Phantoms and 4 Flagstones? No. I actually think that I probably would be trying that out if I was trying mono white.
I was definitely thinking about it.
Yeah, I definitely had a couple times where I was like, well, if this Plains is coming into play tapped, it would be nice if it was just a Surveil land instead. Yeah. White Urborg and MH4, yes, please. That would be great.
It wouldn't even be that good. You'd play one copy in D&T, and then you'd get like suck.
It wouldn't be good, but
it'd just be like the smallest of upgrades. No one's gonna be putting together their Plains Urborg Flash Fire deck in Modern. Who cares? It doesn't matter, Watsy. You can print it. The only ones you can't print are like Island and Mountain. The Plains one is fine.
Do you think a double splash build like Mardu is possible? Yes, because I played Abzan for a while, splashing for Gaddock Teague. I think
the second splash has to be like micro.
Yeah.
Usually, like you splash red for Magus, you're not playing like Pyroblast and Thoughtseizes or something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, right. I've also played one Magus off of one Plateau off of a Black Splash. Any more than that, not realistic.
Yeah. I guess also related to that, build around Forfelia and put one. How do you pronounce that one? Draknian?
Yeah, Draknian. Yeah.
Someone has not learned about the new Assassin's Creed set and Phantom Blade, which is just much better Draknian, that you don't have to put a red land or a 6-drop in your deck. You can at least play a 5-drop instead.
Here we go.
Also,
for those unaware,
Also, you don't really need the Felias. You can just like Flicker Wisp and Yori on it. You can Felia it if you really want to, but
Yeah.
Also, wait, I lost the one talking about Thoughtseize. Where did it go? Talk about how Thoughtseize is bad right now. I don't understand this take because, uh, circling back to what we always circle back to is scam. Scam's the only matchup that ever matters, and the only thing that matters in scam matchups is like you want to be in a reasonable position on like turn 3 and 4 at that, and so you need impactful plays to be doing early, and Thoughtseize is that, and there's almost nothing else that is that.
Yeah.
Thoughtseize is like perfectly fine right now. I don't understand the vision of Thoughtseize as bad. Bowmaster, yeah, sure. Bowmaster's not very good right now. That's the reason like no one's playing it main deck. It's in like sideboards of Scam. I could maybe play like one in Black Splashes. I know we kind of cut them all wholesale for Emperors, but you could like maybe talk me into playing one for like a ping and for like a tutorable like draw hate thing. But like Thoughtseize is still good in a matchup that's like, or in a format even that's just so hyper condensed into like being able to interact early.
Yeah. Like it's not, and like there's a theoretical world where Thoughtseize is a bad top deck, and that is a world where isn't the current legacy where everybody has a card advantage engine now. Nobody's hand is like fully empty basically ever. And there's just, you're basically always going to be able to trade it for a card. There are going to be times where it will be trading for a better card or a better time to be trading for a card, but like no, it's just fine. Like I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't understand the horrible top. Like your deck is also full of a bunch of amazing top scam, and you like one mana interaction to like be able to like double spell like turn 3 or 4. Happy to draw it. The only time you're not happy to draw it is if your scam opponent is suddenly hellbent and has a board presence and you don't have a board presence. Yeah, the black splash is certainly not free. It has never been free. The is like there are costs associated with them. It is the weighing the costs of the splashes of the shakier mana bases potentially for the powerful, more impactful plays versus playing these cards that mono white doesn't have access.
If your opinion is that the black splash is bad, you are allowed to have that opinion. But if you are just trying to convince us that it is bad, you can go elsewhere. Let's put it that way. Like,
yeah, if we're gonna talk about like putting bad cards that are bad against scam in our deck, like we're gonna talk about how mono white is like a 4 white orchid phantom deck, and how you never want to top deck that card against scam, and that card is like we don't have to go down that road.
Yeah. Someone asked earlier if Ajani is making the cut in the red splash. I think it's a solid, probably not, but maybe. Ajani, it does a lot for a card that only costs 2 mana. I'm just not sure that it does anything that D&T is really looking for. Notably,
crazy back in 2017 D&T. I remember I was beating down WotC's door for like Caracasable token generator, like legendary Blade Splicer. Man, I would have been going crazy for this card.
Yeah. I think the main thing is that like you don't want it as just a card that makes 2/1 tokens. We've already been able to do that with cards like Gideon Ally of Zendikar that's basically never been good. It's obviously a 4-mana planeswalker is very different from a 2, like a 1/2 creature that you can Karakas, but like just making a 2/1 every turn has historically not been a good thing for D&T to be doing. However, I think that might reasonably change, specifically in a red splash when we get Chainsaw, because this is a card that like if you get it into play, there's like basically no incentive for your opponent to like ever be able to spend a card on getting it out of play, which means that you might just basically have a red permanent in play for the removal part of a Johnny's abilities, which is where I think you would actually get a lot of value out of it.
You could also chainsaw Johnny's brother in half in order to flip your Johnny, which is both really funny and one of the only ways you can actually flip your own Johnny in a deck like this. One of the reasons that I'm kind of low on it is because there's almost no incentive. You can almost never put your opponent into a position where you force them to flip your Ajani, and you have almost no tools to flip your own Ajani, so it's kind of rough. It's a card that like if you really want to play 4 because it's really good in multiples, but like 4 is a lot of slots to dedicate to this card that's kind of mediocre on its own. It's a cool value card that I'm definitely interested in trying. It definitely has notable upgrades, especially if you play the red splash.
Yep.
It's not a card that's high on my list, but it's a card that like you could definitely try out.
Yeah. Newton, hello. I believe the list on my Stream Decker is what I was last working on. Let me double check. Do my decks. If it has Emperor of Bones in it, then the answer is yes. But Stream Decker is being very slow right now. I think that Ajani literally reads "You can't attack on the ground until you kill this." I think doesn't have much, like nothing can get blocked. It's like that's why removal is so important, because combat math doesn't matter when every deck has a creature. Like every creature either flies or has menace. That's just how things work now. Blocking doesn't happen. So like that, I don't think that that's an accurate evaluation of like the effect that a Johnny has on the board by himself.
Also, Violet, no, we're not bringing back Palace Jailer. We're never bringing back Palace Jailer. I guess technically, if we want to get really technical, Jailer stocks went the tiniest little bit upward because people are playing Bowmaster West. The card was completely and utterly unplayable. You should be embarrassed to put it in your deck when Bowmaster was big. Now it is simply not good.
Yes, agreed. Maybe it's worth looking at a Johnny when Grief isn't around, but it doesn't really change the fact that like here's a way to put it. There's very few matchups I'm worried about if I can block. If I can block, I feel like there's just so much more that D&T is able to do if blocking is an option you have in the first place. I think the important way to build the deck is for all of the situations where you don't get to block, because your opponent has creatures that fly, creatures that can't be blocked, they're removing all your stuff anyway, things like that. And again, Menace is everywhere.
Johnny's very clearly a better modern card than a Legacy card for reasons. It's Modern Horizons, right? They designed the card for Modern, not Legacy. The modern decks that play a Johnny are not Yorion decks and play 4 copies of a Johnny, so they're more likely to have multiple copies that can just flip itself. The red-white deck is better and has more ways to flip your own a Johnny and has more red permanents in it. Like a Johnny makes, and like some of the red-white decks also have additional cats that have like synergy with a Johnny, because like Ocelot Pride or whatever has extra Johnny synergies. Modern has the tools to make a Johnny a better card. Like Flage and Galvanic Discharge or whatever can like kill your own creature to flip your Johnny, stuff like that. There are hoops to jump through to make a Johnny good, and those hoops are much easier to jump through in a format like Modern, in a deck like the red-white deck that plays a Johnny or whatever, than they would be in just regular D&T, play 4 copies of a Johnny, hope sort of stuff. Maybe you could put it in a red splash and pair it with like a couple of Goblin Bombardier, throw the token, flip your Johnny, now you have a red permanent, and you zero the Johnny after. That actually sounds kind of sick. But
sounds like if you're getting to do all that, there's a lot of ways to win the game, right?
Then you have gone a Johnny into Bombardiers, and you're
that is ultimately a lifelong complaint against everything you're talking about doing in D&D that costs more than 2 mana. It takes a while to get to that point because you don't do anything proactively. You're very reactive. So I shouldn't say you don't do anything proactively, but your first step is living. Then you get to do the cool stuff. Could 3 Caracas be the ideal number? It's common to get 2 in hand minigames. I feel like 9 times out of 10, if I draw multiple Caracas, the first one's getting wastelanded. That's very common for me, and I think Caracas is just too important in most. Like
Caracas is like really nuts with your Yorion Violent games.
Yeah,
it's been basically a 4-up since Yorion came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got better even in mono white with White Orchid Fandom. You can focus and then play your new one.
Yep.
So you have like additional outs like that. Sometimes you just have to, and you just kind of have a word start, and that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles.
Yeah, Myco Spawn targets Crocus a lot, that's for sure.
Does Myco Spawn exile a non-basic?
Yeah, it does.
Exile? That's so messed up. They can kill your flagstones?
I'm telling you, dude, I fucking hate Eldrazi are just like a game design nightmare to me. I don't know why they did this again, but it's almost midnight and I can't do that to myself right now, so.
I was thinking about like not playing 4 flags. So I was playing Mono White versus Scam, and they played a Dothy Voidwalker in the Wasteland. I mean, I was like, well this sucks
fuck.
a lot.
Shit. I don't like that.
I kind of just want more basics in my deck, huh?
IXEthris, thank you so much for the sub for the 9 months. Hell yeah. Fortunately, you're coming in close to the end, but hey, if you have a question for us while we're here, let us know.
Also, scrolling back up into chat because I really want to beat this point into the ground, because some people don't seem to understand it. If your stance is that White Orchid is good versus Scam because you pre-war Formalware it back and it's a 4/4 flying Vigilance, White Orchid Fandom is not the good card there. Pre-war is, and if you're rolling basically any card back, it's going to be better than White Orchid Phantom is in that position.
Yep. Correct. Magus on 1 plateau. Yeah, I've done that. I've done that before. Like that's definitely possible off of basically any other splash. Magus is a strong card. It's a card that you can recruit for. I've done it before. With how many non-basic, like heavy non-basic decks there are, at least right now, it's possible that a black splash is going to want to play a plateau with a Magus just to have that option available. The addition of White Orchid Phantom makes that less necessary for sure, but we'll see.
Notably, the take of like you lock Eldrazi out with the Magus to the moon until they find like this isn't all true, because if they have Mox Diamond, they can A, cast their color Eldrazi, and B, more specifically cast their stupid Myco Spawn and tutor up their basic waste and then unlock a lot of their deck again.
Mm-hmm.
It at least does shut off Cosmic's Command, which is pretty big because they can just never get colorless, unless that's a lie. They can get it off of Spawn that they make off of Fleshraker and stuff too. So there are ways around Magus of the Moon, so it's not like just like a windmill slam it and they just die.
Yeah. The only colored Eldrazi that doesn't require colorless is Myco Spawn. And I guess technically the Null Drifter doesn't require any colorless mana.
You put in your sideboard expecting Moon Stompy and Painter, more removal spells probably mostly. I think the new Wrath of the Skies probably pretty good versus Painter. Definitely not as good versus Moon Stompy. I would probably still board it in. You like shoot Fable tokens and treasures and Chrome Moxen and stuff.
Yeah, I can see it.
It obviously is like very bad at clearing their actual creatures, but both of those matchups you just kind of want to overload on a lot of removal.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. I would never put more removal spells in my deck thinking about Moonstompy because that matchup's kind of free. Um, but there's already a lot of incentive to play stuff like Paths, so I would just also bring them in there.
Yeah, if you really want to beat Painter, you can play the Cool. I know I've put that in my sideboard at different occasions in Legacy, generally when like Painter was bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a card that sometimes you bring to the table.
Yep. I think we'll take questions for just a couple more minutes, and then we'll.
If anyone has any last minute questions. Seems like we are winding down, though. We definitely got through basically everything I wanted to say about D&T right now. What should you name the frog that came through your window? Glarb. Calamity's Augur. I'm a big fan of that name.
Is that one of the new ones?
Yes, it's the Sultai frog who stole like the big owl egg.
Hmm.
I'm an expert in Bloomborough lore now, and by that I mean I watched some of the stream that they did today.
More than me. I just saw the spoilers coming through.
I mean, the point of Emrakul is not that like you suddenly auto win versus. The point of Emrakul is that you can feel comfortable about like tapping lower and not getting instantly comboed, and you can pretty easily fight the grindy elements using your removal spells and ignore the painter grindstone threat. It's like the Splinter Twin situation where like you have to like cast all your spells really awkwardly out of fear of a combo that might not happen, and then they get you with like the make a bunch of saga tokens or whatever. But if you're suddenly not scared of that, then you can play the game a lot differently. Right. It's not just the Emrakul.
If you get to ignore the combo, beating the Fable Saga half of their deck is not difficult. We're already kind of built to beat a deck like that. So,
moral of the story: ban grief so we can start to play Legacy again. Yeah, that's the long and the short of it. Honestly, it's just man, this shit sucks.
so boring. I'm so sick of it. But hopefully it'll be done soon.
We forgot to do the giveaway.
The giveaway. Oh my god.
I explicitly told you that I was gonna forget, and then
I know, but I've never done this before. This is all new to me. So there's an exclamation point giveaway and then something,
and then space and then the giveaway word.
All right.
Give away 120 play points.
All right.
One chatter.
Giveaway is live. Please type Noodle if you would like to enter the giveaway, and then we'll give it a few minutes. This is a code for 120 play points on Magic: The Gathering Online. Please only enter if you have at least a way to use it or someone that you can give it to at the very least. So
except Toast, you can't give it to Toast. That's my one stipulation.
There we go. Oh my god, I heard Ishina's in the other room.
She's in the chat. Yes, type Noodle in the chat if you want to. It's it's not case sensitive, so.
I will end it as soon as my clock hits midnight. How about that? So you got a minute and change.
In conclusion, ban grief. Please let us play the post grief format. Everyone pray that WotC doesn't like that. Modern is so hopelessly broken that they emergency ban Nadu and then they'll tack a grief ban on, and everyone will be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Preferably next week, so I can play the Legacy Showcase qualifier being a 1 week old post Grief Band Legacy would be so fucking cool.
That would actually be pretty sick.
Because
Especially
it's not like paper where it's just like, oh, I'm screwed. I can't like get my new card deck, and everyone's online. Just get a new deck.
yeah.
It's totally fine. And then it's like far enough out from Gen Con that people can like figure out their other shit. It's like the perfect time to be banned next week.
Yeah.
Banned on Monday, I believe. I don't believe, but I can pray.
How do I end the giveaway, by the way?
You just type !1 giveaway again, and it'll give you a name.
Hell yeah. I was hoping that would be the answer, but I wanted to make sure. Yeah, it's gonna go. The fact that it isn't gone is unfortunate, but because it just puts us in this lame duck situation, but it will be gone eventually.
If we really have to sit through another month and a half of like lame duck, like it's really suck. Hey, Matzel,
hell yeah. All right, you will get a DM from xJCloud, right? Do you just DM them the code?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, I just whisper them.
Cool. Toast did not win. Toast didn't enter.
Yeah, Toast isn't even here. He left. Like a loser. Enjoy your code. Let me know if it doesn't work. They occasionally don't work, so I just always give that disclaimer. Sometimes Daybreak messes up, and then I can always get a backup code.
All right, cool. All right, it's midnight for me at this point. I should get to bed, and I think we've done enough talking for one night, so we're gonna call it there. Thank you everybody for joining us for this third annual State of the Noodle address. There is a possibility that we will do another one later this year after a grief ban. Like, let's say it gets to August. Maybe we'll do one in like the October-November time frame when we
like
have an eternal weekend date, whatever that means, you know, something like that. We'll probably do an update around then, but it had been a while. There's a lot to talk about with things that changed in Modern Horizons 3, so we felt like now was a good time to strike while the iron was hot in that sense.
It really felt like a lot of D&T players were kind of clamoring for some sort of guidance in this respect. So, you know, I'd like to give the people what they want, a little bit of shepherding in hopefully correct directions, and hopefully for everyone watching right now or in the future watching this on like YouTube or Twitch VODs, hopefully you got a little bit out of it and you can at least survive this next month and a half of grief-filled Legacy a little bit better.
Yeah.
Go on from there.
Thank you, everybody, for checking in. Thank you to everybody who followed or subscribed during the stream. I wasn't able to keep up with all of that, but I appreciate it all very much. If you missed any of this, I will be uploading the VOD to my YouTube channel. If I go over to this outro screen right here, that's my YouTube channel there. It'll be uploaded there. I'll have some info posted to my Twitter as well with links to the VOD plus some pictures of the deck lists that we featured on the stream tonight. Any final, I think you just kind of gave your parting thoughts, but anything you want to say before we sign off?
Watch The Owl House. On Disney Plus.
I never let you. You know what? I'm sorry. That one's on me. Should have let you say that so much earlier than right now.
It's a great TV show. Big fan personally. That's it. Also, follow both of us on Twitch and Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube. I am xJCloud on all those platforms. And obviously, Akleth is Akleth on all of those platforms.
Yep. This is normally JR or xJCloud's stream time. So if you want to watch D&T on Tuesdays, you can find him at his channel, twitch.tv/xJCloud at 9 Eastern, or, you know, to be inclusive, 8 Central Time. And I also stream D&T Thursdays and Sundays at 9 Eastern. So that's where you can, when and where you can find us. But I think we've done enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to close this stream. Thank you, everybody, and hope you all have a good night.